greffier. I don't have a list of members. Not the end of the world, but is that a spare? Thank you. Faites appel, s'il vous plaît, monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brélade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Gruville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Southern. Madame le deputy Labby. Monsieur le deputy Tadier. Monsieur le deputy Luce. Madame le deputy Dublé. Monsieur le deputy Morel.
Présent.
Madame le deputy de Hegera.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Ward. Madame le deputy Alves. Madame le deputy Gardner. Monsieur le deputy Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Ozef. Monsieur le deputy Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Coles. Madame le deputy Poré.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Wall.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Miles. Madame le deputy Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Feltham. Madame le deputy Binet. Madame le deputy Jeune. Madame le deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Howe.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Binet. Monsieur le deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Curtis.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Ward.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal, car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Default.
Excuse me, the Constable of Trinity, I think, is detained on parish business and will be here as quickly as he can. Thank you.
Did he ask you to make that explanation then?
He explained last week to me that was going. He unfortunately had to attend to a parishioner this morning. Thank you, sir.
Members accept that as being away on excuse.
We have to vote, please, sir. I think the oath of office is that we attend the States Assembly primarily, and this is one of the contradictions, unfortunately, of the dual role. I think constables need to make a choice about what the priority is.
Could we wait till you're actually present? You're absent at the moment, Deputy Tony. Yes. What I suggest we do is we will complete the roll call so members have the right to speak on this matter before we decide whether or not to excuse the Constable of Trinity. Carry on, please.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Labby.
Sir, Deputy Labby is on a CPA conference in Ghana. I ask it to be marked on State's business.
Absent on State's business.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Luce.
Sir, Deputy Luce informed us all that he was travelling back yesterday. His flight was cancelled. I was to propose that we mark him excusé. Please, sir.
Cancelled flight. Can we assume that no one objects? Yes. Excusez.
Madame le Deputy Doublé.
So Deputy Double travelling to the States has a car trouble this morning, and she's on the way. If she can mark excuse and she'll join shortly.
Yes. Yes, excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Monsieur le Deputy Ward est absent on State's business.
Away on State's business. He's at the same conference in Ghana, is he? Right.
Madame Deputy Alves.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Ozef. Vous jurez que Monsieur le Deputy Ozef est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le Deputy Coles.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Miles.
Sir, Deputy Miles is also at the CPA conference.
State's business.
Madame le Deputy Feltham.
Présente.
Les états sont constitués. Then we start with the roll call issue as to whether or not the Connétable of Trinity, who's dealing, we are told, with parish matter, can be marked excusé or en défaut. Yes, Deputy.
So, first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak in this way. You could have gone straight to the appel, of course, or not at all. The point to make here is that this isn't a personal matter against the constable, so I get on well with the constable. The underlying issue, I think, is the fact that if we'd have simply been informed of the fact that he's on parish business, that's fine, we could have all accepted that. And I think the problem is we're being asked to excuse the constable. And this is where, of course, it gets back to the point of this whole roll call thing that we do twice, and I know that PPC are looking at it, and of course they're looking at the way that works is maybe problematic in itself. But the excuses that we're starting to hear is, I'm just waiting for somebody to stand up and say, I'm sorry, but the deputy's detained because the dog has eaten her homework, or his homework. And that almost seems to be the level that we're descending to, because in the past there was a lot of discernment and discretion that members placed on themselves, and they would never, if they were away on holiday and missed a plane, for example, and I know that's not what we're talking about in this instance, but I think it might save us these kind of situations in the future, you would just take it on the chin. If you book a holiday to come back just one day before the States Assembly and you live in a small island which is surrounded by sea by its very nature, and you know that there's fog sometimes and that planes get delayed and boats get delayed, you normally make arrangements so that you can get back here in time. And if circumstances transpire that you can't get back here, I think you just take that on the chin and say, okay, I may not be able to make today, and you explain that to your constituents if you need to. So I'm very worried about the way this is rolling, but specifically in this circumstance, I've got every respect for the difficult jobs constables do, because in many ways they do twice as much work in the sense that they've got two roles, and they decide to be states members. And in being a states member, your job is to be here. There are other officials in the parish who should be able to deputise and act for you in that instance. And if constables can't, in all cases, juggle that job, they may need to think about whether or not the roles are separated, and that if they want to be a constable and a deputy, they may have to face 2 elections. And I think the constable who stood as a member of a party should be well au fait before we got elected with those dual roles. So I don't think we should be voting to excuse the constable. I think we should just, in fact, the demand for him to be excused should really be withdrawn, and we should just acknowledge the fact that he'll be a bit late today because he's got other political issues to attend to.
Constable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Howell made it quite clear that the constable did not ask her to ask for him to be excused by the Assembly this morning. She stood up of her own free will to make the suggestion. I believe that was an error on her part. The constable recognised that he is not excusé. I'm sure we've all been in the situation where we have been a little late into the chamber because something has cropped up, and we recognise that we will be marked as defo. We turn up maybe half an hour later when we have dealt with whatever we have needed to deal with, whether that is a personal matter or whether in the case of deputies, previously senators or constables, it was a constituency matter. My view is that the constable should be marked as defo. Whether Deputy Howell wants to withdraw her request for him to be marked as excusé is up to her. I'm sure Deputy Tadier won't know that the deputy has indicated that she wishes to speak. Whether, regarding members being stuck on the mainland or wherever because of cancelled flights or because the car breaks down, etc., we make the decision when somebody stands up to propose that someone is excused for those reasons. But in this instance, I would urge that if Deputy Howell does not withdraw the request for excusé, that we vote that the Constable of Trinity is defo, because he did not request it, because he recognised that it is not a reason for him to be defo. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. I did make an error, sir. He did not ask me to ask for him to be excusé, but I just remembered him asking, and I just was asking, but I thank you, I'll withdraw.
The members agree that Deputy Howell can withdraw the request? Very well. The Connétable is defo. Right. There is nothing under A. Under B, a number of subordinate acts have been lodged. There are a number of matters that have been presented or described on the consolidated order paper under C. Under D, the following propositions have been lodged. Draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licensing Jersey Regulations P40. Amendment lodged by the Minister for the Environment. Extension of Cold Weather Bonus P64 Amendment lodged by Deputy Borre. Draft Planning and Building Commencement Number 8 Amendment Law P71 lodged by the Minister for the Environment. Proposed Government Plan 2024 to 27 lodged by the Council of Ministers P72. Order of Government Department Vacancy is lodged by Deputy Andrews P73. Increase in revenue expenditure for agriculture and fisheries lodged by Deputy Luce P74. Ethical Standards States Members, lodged by Deputy Scott, P75. Reform of the composition of the States Assembly, P76, lodged by the same Deputy. Draft Income Support Amendment Number 23, Jersey Regulations, P77, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. And funding for the Jersey Reds, P78, lodged by Deputy Farnham. Under E, we have the notice of withdrawal of a lodged proposition, appointment of non-elected members on scrutiny panels, which have been lodged by Deputy Scott, P70. There is nothing under F, G and H. A number of answers to questions have been tabled under I, and we come now to oral questions. Yes.
So I wonder if it would be appropriate for me to ask whether the Assembly is prepared to allow P78 funding for Jersey Reds to be debated at this week's sitting, sir.
You wish to take that matter out of order, because normally we would deal with it at the beginning of public business.
Well, so I'm thinking that if the Assembly were to allow it, it gives members a bit more time to prepare for it, rather than wait and perhaps prepare and the Assembly say later on that they're not prepared to accept it. I propose we make that decision now, sir, and take it as the last item of business on the agenda as in line with the order paper.
Very well. I think your first proposition, Deputy, must be that the Assembly, notwithstanding the current order paper, deal with this issue as the first item, and then you'd have to make the proposition to deal with the waiving of standing orders and the lodgement of time. So is the proposition that the State is master of its own business in this respect, is the proposition that we deal with the matter now before questions seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on that proposition? All those in favour of dealing with the matter now kindly show. Those against? Very well, we'll move straight and deal with the question of dealing with Jersey Reds. Now, Deputy Farnham, you've lodged your funding proposition at P78. There's a need under Standing Order 80 to suspend the Standing Order 32 so the proposition can be listed for the current meeting, and that the lodging period be reduced in accordance with Standing Order 26.7 to allow the matter to be debated as the last item of business. The first question, I think, Deputy, is where does this, do you accept the amendment lodged by Deputy Felton?
Yes, sir, I do.
Felton, would you wish, I beg your pardon, Deputy Felton, would you therefore wish this proposition from the Deputy to be dealt with for your amendment as well?
Yes, sir.
Very much. Well, then, if you'd like to make the proposition, then we'll assume we're dealing with your proposition and the amendment from Deputy Felton.
Thank you, sir. And first, I would say that I accepted Deputy Felton's amendment because I think it's helpful to the proposition. There is a business plan attached as well, which is self-explanatory. Members will know that the situation with the Jersey Reds came as a shock to many of us, only being announced in the media on Thursday, which hasn't left much time to address the matter as one would perhaps hope to, given the short period of time we have to rescue or salvage the situation. And having talked to representatives from the club and their sponsors over the weekend, it's clear that there is a very limited window of time available to us to provide a solution, if that is indeed the wish of this Assembly, sir, to achieve that, and for the Assembly to request the Minister take the necessary steps to do that. We're going to need to debate it at today's sitting. And it's to that end, sir, that I crave members' indulgence and ask that we allow the debate to go ahead and suspend the relevant standing orders. Thank you.
So the proposition is to suspend Standing Order 32, which provides for the required lodging period for a matter such as this, and then to allow the lodging period to be reduced in accordance with Standing Order 26.7. You wish to take both of those together, presumably?
Yes, please, sir.
Is that proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? No member wishes to speak on the proposition. Those in favour kindly show. Those against? Very well. We will debate the funding of the Jersey Reds at the end of the order paper.
Thank you, sir, and I thank members.
Yes, we return now to oral questions. The first oral question will be asked by Deputy Farnham of the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. In line with the adoption of paragraph B of Proposition P32/2023, the removal of compulsory independent taxation for existing married couples and civil partnerships by the States Assembly in July of this year, will the Minister advise how he is ensuring that joint taxation remains available for married couples and civil partners? Thank you.
Thank you. So the vote on P32 left us with a circle to square. Let's hope we don't do that again today. The proposed government plan confirms that ministers are working to provide an option for couples who were resident in Jersey and who were married or in a civil partnership before the 1st of January 2022 to file a joint tax return. Following discussions with officials last week on the work needed to facilitate joint filing, I will now be proposing to lodge a new proposition to replace P41 with a view to debate early in 2024, and we will be engaging with States members ahead of that lodging, sir.
Supplementary question, Deputy?
No, thank you, sir.
Very well. We come now to question 2. That Deputy Kovac will ask the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Given the recent success of the Jersey team at the World's Bowls Championship, alongside other sports clubs securing medals at world-class championships, will the Minister confirm if clubs that represent the island on a high level are awarded the same level of funding as Jersey Reds? And will he further provide a breakdown of what the £370,000 provided to Jersey Reds was intended for?
Minister.
Sir, Deputy Stevenson will act as rapporteur on this question.
Certainly. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Jersey has some incredible local athletes who represent the island in many sports around the world and put Jersey on the map. But the simple answer to this question is that no, they're not all treated the same, and certainly not the same as Jersey Reds have been in the past. It is an area of frustration for me personally, and members will be aware that I have committed to a review of government's delivery of sports policy, and that will be published later this year. This will identify where delivery of sport can be improved to better support clubs and athletes across many and all sporting disciplines. I will also be producing an elite sports strategy which will seek to identify how we can support and fund pathways for local athletes in a fair and even way across sports. Turning to the second part of the question about Jersey Reds, 2 payments were made during 2023. The first was in June and consisted of £130,000 to meet June's wage costs, with an additional £90,000 provided for other immediate costs. A further payment of £150,000 was made directly by government in August to meet the club's urgent cash flow constraints and underwrite operations until September. The Council of Ministers considered further requests for funding during September and concluded it was not in the best interests of the island to provide further support.
Supplemental question, Deputy Kovac?
Yes, sir. Does the Minister consider that what last funding was intended for Jersey Red has been achieved, and was the Council of Ministers aware at the time of funding being agreed that the club's financial position is at risk of collapsing?
Can I ask the questioner, sir, if she means the emergency payments that we've just referred to?
The last funding that was agreed at that time.
Last funding that was agreed. So, therefore, the payments to which you've just made reference, I believe.
Yes, those fundings were emergency payments, as I said, to meet those emergency costs in that instance, to pay wages and the other immediate costs. The government made it very clear that the Jersey Reds directors should be working to find more sustainable, continued ways to fund the club going forward.
Deputy Farnham.
Thank you. So having provided essential emergency funding for the Jersey Reds, why did the government then decide to effectively write off that emergency funding by not providing further funding and furthermore not informing the club that they weren't going to provide that emergency funding until 8 days after the Council of Ministers made a decision, so that's just 1 day before the club's deadline?
Thank you, sir. The emergency payments were given at what we recognise was a difficult time for the for the club, and were designed to prevent an unstructured collapse of Jersey Reds. And we were very conscious that there were people's jobs and livelihoods depending on these wages. And at that moment in time, it became clear that there was an opportunity to look at a potential way forward in the hope that there may be a sustainable way forward. And some work was completed to look at what that could amount to, which the Deputy himself has now shared some of that work from Santander, adjoined to his proposition. And a decision was taken that those payments gave us the opportunity to not just pay the wages of those players and prevent that unstructured collapse. It gave the club time to consider where else it may get funding from as well, and also it gave government time to assess that work that was being completed, looking at future business models. Government then made a decision based on that evidence, and it was a very clear decision around the Council of Ministers table. And I think there are many, many holes in that business plan that we will come on to later today. There was a second part of the question which I've now forgotten. Apologies, sir.
Thank you, sir. It was just to ask why, given the urgency of the situation and the full knowledge that the Reds were in financial difficulty, the decision wasn't communicated until 8 days after it was taken by the Council of Ministers.
Thank you, sir. As soon as the decision was made, efforts were undertaken to try to contact one of the main parties in these discussions, who's had been liaising with government on this matter, and unfortunately that person was away. I believe Teams calls were offered and reached out, but that meeting couldn't happen until the following Wednesday due to their diary commitments.
Well, supplemental question.
Well, sir, yes, in follow-up to that, sir, claiming that the government were not able to get hold of anybody from the Jersey Reds, I would have to suggest that the Deputy is inadvertently misleading the Assembly, sir. But I would say that the chairman and the management of the Jersey Reds Trading Company, the company that are responsible and receive the...
Well, Deputy, this has to be a supplemental question.
Yes,
so far, you're giving information to the Assembly and you're not asking a question.
Were on standby on tenterhooks, I believe, for all of that week and were not contacted at all. Why was the chairman of the club the person responsible for this not contacted?
Why was the chairman of the club not contacted?
I don't have all the details of how officials reached out to those individuals. What I would say is that there's a pattern of behaviour over the past year of actually finding it very difficult to sometimes get hold of some of these individuals involved and to have discussions with them. One of the individuals who wanted the discussion was to take place with could not be there and wanted to be there face to face, is my understanding. I can't say any more than that. What I would add is that the government's position on future long-term funding amounting to hundreds of thousands of pounds has been very clear for a year, since November last year, so almost a year. When I sat in a meeting with two of the directors of that club, I made my position clear. There has since been formal letters to that effect and numerous correspondence on the matter. It was no surprise to the directors of Jersey Reds that this Council of Ministers would not be supporting their repeated requests for government public funding.
Well, I have Deputy Southern, Mezek, Tadier, Feltham and Scott. I won't take any more after that because that will take us well over the time limit. So, Deputy Southern.
Yes, thank you, sir. At the time of the emergency payment, as it is described, did the Minister have sight of a in any way viable business plan?
The emergency payment, well, no, because there is no viable business plan. That's probably it's a very simple answer.
Supplemental, Deputy Sutherland?
So, in effect, the Minister was throwing good money after bad.
What the government was seeking to do was to prevent an unstructured collapse of a very well-loved organisation that means an awful lot to Jersey, and there is no denying that. We have seen an awful lot of outpouring support, passion and love for Jersey Reds. There are benefits socially and economically, although we may not all agree on what those figures may be to the island. There were also people's jobs at stake here, and we believed at that moment in time that we were acting responsibly with public money to try to look at what the options could have been. We made it very, very clear our government position on that and where we would be going with it, but it was a very, justified decision.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. In respect of the emergency funding which was agreed and was paid, can the Assistant Minister inform the Assembly whether or not all of the objective financial advice from Treasury officials that the government received was in support of those payments being made?
The advice that ministers received from officers was that we could go ahead with the payments that as we wanted to in that situation. I believe there is a letter of instruction that is being put together from an accounting officer. There were two different departments involved, Treasury and Economic Development, and the Economic Development accounting officer, there is a letter of instruction that relates to one of the payments, and forgive me if I've confused which one it may be. The Economic Development Minister will be able to provide more information on that.
Thank you, sir. And the question wasn't about whether payments could be made. Of course they could. It was about whether they should be. And if letters of instruction were issued, that sounds to me like advice was given by officers that payments should not be made and that politicians had to formally overrule those officials on that. So can the Assistant Minister confirm whether or not the objective advice given from those Treasury officials or government officials who were given letters of instruction was that the government should not proceed with providing that emergency funding?
Yes, the very nature of a letter of instruction means that accounting officer was not comfortable with that decision, but it is well within the rights of ministers to be able to make decisions for beyond that.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I've recorded the words that government basically agreed to pay the wages of players to prevent an unstructured collapse of the club. So I'm tempted, sir, to ask whether the government were happy to see a structured collapse of the club. I don't know why they were so interested in what kind of collapse the club had, so long as it did collapse. But my question, sir, is to what extent does the Assistant Minister think that this sets a precedent? So what we've got here is government has decided to pay a business the wages of the employees of that business to stop it collapsing, but then say, but we're not going to give you any more money because we don't think we should be funding you. Does that set a precedent to other businesses and potentially other sports clubs in the Jersey who might find themselves in that situation in future?
Thank you, sir. In relation to the Deputy's first comments, which weren't actually part of any question as far as I could work out, one of the conditions that I was very keen to ensure that these emergency payments helped to provide was actually to separate the amateur club from the Jersey Reds. We learned in the process of these discussions that that had not happened yet. Despite they were maybe working in that way, the legal documents had not been signed, and it was to be a condition of that. I am frustrated to learn this morning that despite that being a condition, it's still actually not happened. Regarding a precedent being set, I believe, as I said at the beginning, the answer to this question, the way Jersey Reds have been treated by previous governments over many years has been a very unique situation all through, setting all kinds of precedents. We're yet to see others achieve any kind of funding at similar levels as well.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Well, yes, I think so, sir. I mean, I suppose it's a question of where the government sees its political policy and ideology with regards to the funding of what we've seen as a very successful sport club, which many think has brought elite sport to Jersey, economic benefit, and also an ability for people to watch high-quality sport in the island, maybe those who are too poor to travel. So does this government see itself as an interventionist government or a laissez-faire government when it comes to the funding of sport, or perhaps more generally?
This government has made its position very clear over the past year that it does not see its place as being to fund a private business, whether that is a sporting business or otherwise, in this way. Previous grant documents relating to payments under the previous government actually refer to grants being to secure championship rugby in Jersey. Now, I'm not sure how a government can secure anything like that, actually, and I would question the wording of those documents. They also refer to needing to find a sustainable model, and the last grant agreement actually refers to it being the final payment that Jersey Reds can expect. So,
Deputy Felton.
Thank you, sir. In the Assistant Minister's original answer, she referred to the development of an elite sports strategy. Could she inform the Assembly what the purpose and the intended outcomes of that strategy are?
Absolutely, sir. The strategy is in development at the moment, but it is basically looking at how we support and find pathways for our local athletes to ensure that we reduce some of the inequalities that currently exist in the system, and ensure that people who are competing in Jersey or have the potential to compete at higher levels have the support systems around them that they need. There's currently a large gap with regards to this, and we can help to build a better support system around them, from looking at their nutrition and their mental health right the way through to their strength and conditioning, and enabling a more joined up way of working across lots of sports and different pathways.
Supplemental question, Deputy Felton?
Yes, sir. Does the Minister agree that the Jersey Reds actually does provide some of that support system that she just referred to?
No, sir. Jersey Reds is a professional club and brings professional players to the island to work in jobs at Jersey Reds. They are, obviously, all of those players are going through a very tough time at the moment, and I would never want to speak negatively about them. They've brought some great rugby to Jersey and been an important part of that, but they are not players from Jersey, and the elite sports strategy, I think with the exception of one player from Jersey, who I believe hasn't played for a long time, but the strategy is focusing on providing opportunities for local people, for our local young people growing up in Jersey, and being able to see opportunities and achieve their potential at an elite level of sport if they're able to.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Will the Assistant Minister please advise, did she consider briefing the relevant scrutiny panel on the payments that she was given to avoid the unstructured collapse, and what measures were considered at the time, such as, other than buying time, such as having a Treasury rep on the board, changing the chair, or having a member of the business community on the board as conditions in order to perhaps take better control of the management of the club?
Deputy.
There were lots of scenarios played out and questioned and challenged throughout the conversations. This is not a decision either to grant the emergency payments or to not provide further funding that was taken lightly or quickly. There was an awful lot of work carried out. We discussed all of those points. I even raised things like crowdfunding and others. And to be perfectly honest, the reaction from those involved with the club was lukewarm at best. But being quite frank, there was no appetite for any kind of change at all.
Sir, part of my question hasn't been
Which
responded to about consulting briefing scrutiny.
Yes, briefing scrutiny.
Yes, absolutely, more than happy to brief scrutiny.
But was consideration given to briefing scrutiny?
Apologies, I don't know, but I will find out the answer to that and let you know.
Very well. Supplemental question, Deputy Scott.
Thank you. With respect to the impact on the amateur club, can I please just confirm, is the Assistant Minister saying that the assurances given that the amateur club has been protected from this financial chaos actually isn't based on anything solid?
Thank you, sir. So my understanding is that the legal structures that are currently in place, the formal signing of the document to officially remove the amateur club from any link to Jersey Reds at all has not been actioned, despite it being a condition of that first emergency payment. What I have done is sought to find out what this means for the amateur club, and I'm very confident, and the club is confident, that it is a satisfactory situation currently, even if the Jersey Reds company does go into liquidation. They are confident that it would not have an impact on them. My understanding is that the structure, the company that Jersey Reds is linked to, that links to the amateur club, only holds immovable assets. So it's things like rugby balls, for example. The fixed assets of the amateur club, which, let's remember, is all of the assets at the rugby club, the pitch, the clubhouse, the land, etc., is all in a separate company which has no link into the Jersey Reds.
Very well. Final supplementary, Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. As the Assistant Minister already agreed in her answers, that Jersey Reds in full season also bring back to the economy. If the government would be to commit to give further funding to save Jersey Reds, under what conditions from the club would the Assistant Minister agree with that?
I don't agree with further funding being given to the club at all, so I don't believe I can answer the question apart from saying I don't agree with it.
Very well. We come now to question 3.
Sir, excuse me, may I raise the defo on the Constable of Trinity, please?
Yes, the defo is raised on the Constable of Trinity. And the question 3, Deputy Felton will ask the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to the response to written question 345/2023, will the Minister advise why the North of St Helier Youth Centre capital project is currently on hold, and why the Central St Helier Primary School project is not listed as a capital project?
Minister.
Sir, it would appear that I owe Deputy Feltham something of an apology. As a result of the written question, I sent the Deputy a property schedule where the Youth Centre project appeared in a category marked on hold. And I believe the term itself was probably inappropriate. It should have been titled Work in Progress. The on hold reference was simply referring to the fact that no physical progress has been made, and this is because thus far it's not been possible to identify a suitable location. That said, I can confirm that basic feasibility studies have already been carried out on more than 15 properties, that attempts to find an appropriate site are ongoing, and that in recent weeks a property has been identified that shows a slightly higher degree of promise. As for the second part of the question, I'm aware of proposals for 2 St Helier primary schools, one for the east side and another for the west. Neither of them were listed on that same information sheet, and that's because Property Holdings doesn't currently own the identified eastern site, and the western site has still to be identified. However, as the Deputy might be aware, one of these school projects, the Gas Place project, is mentioned on page 65 in the main report of the 2024 government plan, where £13.5 million has been earmarked for 2026, and it's on page 26. So I should mention that the sum of money involved covers a number of projects, and that project is included in that figure. So, and I do apologise. The department issued a schedule. I didn't study it sufficiently well. I should have identified that that was simply an omission, so I can only apologise. Thank you.
Very much, Minister. Supplemental question.
Thank you, sir. I'm conscious that the funding for the St Helier Youth Centre was secured. I think Deputy Ward, if he were here, would put me right, I'm sure, but around 5 years ago. And also we've known about the need for a school for some time as well. So I would like to seek the Minister's assurance that there are resources and enough people in his department to be able to work on these critical projects for St Helier. Could he give the Assembly his assurance?
Minister.
Yes, I think I can get assurance, but as I say, we are a little bit short-staffed, so things don't happen in quite as much of a hurry as they perhaps ought to, or as we would like. And there's pretty much not much we can do about that, so thank you.
Very well, we come to question 4. Deputy Scott will ask the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether managers in the healthcare sector are subject to compulsory training requirements as is required for the clinical staff they manage? And if not, why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. My apologies to the Assembly that I'm not able to be present today. Firstly, in response to the Deputy's question, following a report produced by the Chief Officer for HCS, which has been shared with the State's Employment Board, and also the Health and Services Scrutiny Panel, a definition of manager has been agreed, and we have identified that there are 45 managers in HCS, making up 1.7% of the workforce. This definition has been used for the purposes of responding to this question. Secondly, by healthcare sector, we're assuming that this is referring to my department only and no other departments nor the private sector. And what I can advise is that all managers or all of those who have managerial responsibilities are required to complete a variety of statutory training and mandatory training, particularly those managers who have clinical roles. They're also expected to complete some clinical training relevant to their professional role.
Supplemental question, Deputy Scott.
Thank you. Could the Minister please advise if there is any formal CPD points given to training and whether the training that is given is something that is has an ongoing programme built around it?
Thank you, Deputy. I think for some individuals, the concept of CPD is something that people have been used to through all of their careers in terms of picking up the accreditation points that demonstrate their competence and their knowledge in their chosen area. But sadly, I don't think that this applies to everybody. And it's certainly something that I would be looking to the department to enhance across all people who are involved in training and development.
Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister advise whether diversity awareness training is something that's included as a matter of course for both clinical and non-clinical staff?
I think as a matter of course, I think it varies across the piece, and it's something that I've been very mindful of over the last couple of months, particularly given some of the concerns raised by staff about some of the attitudes and cultural differences that people have experienced. So this is certainly one of the areas that we will be asking the service to concentrate on in terms of identifying how and in what way we can best address this type of training across the service.
Supplemental, Deputy.
I thank the Minister for her answer, and I wonder if she would report back to myself and Deputy Jean, who are leading on the equality work, just to help us get an understanding of the culture and the ethos in the hospital.
Yes, sir, thank you. I would be more than happy to do that and report that as part of our cultural programme that's going on currently in HCS.
Final supplementary, Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Is there any training that managers have to undergo on management aspects or negative management aspects and how they might be perceived by employees, such as, in addition to those mentioned by Deputy Dudley, such as just bullying, that sort of thing?
I think across, not only just for HCS, but I think right across all of government services, this might be a question more easily directed to the States Employment Board in terms of its approach to training in this areas for all employees. I don't think health services in particular should be singled out in that regard. But I do believe that we have some programmes in place. Again, I don't think it's systematised or regularised. And that's something that we would look to improve.
Very well, we come now to question 5. The Deputy Southern will ask of the same Minister. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide details of what progress, if any, has been made on the review of the island's health and care costs, including potential options she has under consideration for funding, financing and contracting, to include options for the Health Insurance Fund, and will she explain what additional funding, if any, has been provided to address immediate pressures?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. To the first part of the question, I can confirm that we are making good progress and are on schedule with the work in this area, but as made clear in the government plan 23 to 25, the work is intended to continue throughout 2023. I think there is a lot to talk about in response to this question, and I think given the time constraints that we have around oral questions, it's difficult to go into any detail at this moment, but I would be more than happy to answer this in more detail as part of supplementary questions. To the second part of the question, the department is anticipating underlying financial pressures of up to £35 million, and as set out in the government plan, a financial recovery programme is in place, which will work to reduce these pressures over a 3-year period. In the meantime, an additional £21 million is allocated in 2024 to maintain existing services. This sum will reduce to £14.5 million in 2026 and 2027 as savings and efficiencies are realised as part of that recovery programme.
Supplemental question, Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. If I could point the Minister to the short statement on page 96 of the government plan. It says the work will continue into 2024 to develop potential options for change, which will focus on. So what potential options focus on funding, who pays, financing, how do we raise the money as needed, and contracting, how do we engage our providers to deliver better value. Can the Minister give us some guidance on what those issues might be?
Thank you, sir. Well, the first thing to say is that we have actually established a ministerial group to direct this work, and that comprises of myself, the Minister for Treasury and Resources, and the Minister for Social Security, and the Assistant Minister for Social Security. Where we're at the moment is that we've got a draft national health account which has been prepared for us. And for the first time, we've actually got a picture of what public and private health spending is in Jersey. We will also, people will know, have conducted a poll to ascertain some of the broad public attitudes to future healthcare financing. And we're also undertaking a forecasting exercise, which is currently in the process of being finalised, which sets out what these challenges will be for Jersey over the next 20 years or more. We've also undertaken some informal briefings with the Health and Social Services Scrutiny Panel on the outputs so far, and we'll continue to do this until the work is complete. But at this moment in time, the final stage in the development of the options, I'm expecting to consider advice from the Health Economic Unit in the coming weeks, and then I'll be in a position to provide more information on that basis.
Well, Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. When it comes to the sustainable funding of Jersey's health and care costs, can the Minister outline what importance she gives to the principle of equity and how any discussion of equitable funding for health and care costs is featuring as they come up with their long-term funding proposals?
Well, I think if we pursue the objective of health for all, then clearly we need to make sure that we are providing equitable care and services for islanders. The way that we do that, I think we still have to explore what options we've got available to us. And I think some of those conclusions will be reached through this work.
So I did, the question was about equitable funding of services, not the equitable delivery of services.
And I think that will be, sir, in relation to how we use the intelligence that comes from the work that we're doing to address the issue of equity. At this moment in time, I'm not in a position to be able to give any further detail, but clearly that's something that I will be mindful of.
Supplemental question.
Thank you, sir. The Minister will hopefully be aware of a previous attempt by a government to find a sustainable funding option for healthcare, which involved the introduction of a health tax, which was an inequitable funding solution because it sought to tax those with the broadest shoulders proportionately the least and those with least incomes proportionately the most. Will the Minister, bearing in mind the effects that poverty can have on health outcomes, rule out a similar funding model and make sure that when we fund our health and care costs, that we abide by the principle of from each according to their ability to each according to their need?
Well, I think I've just outlined that we have got a whole host of intelligence and information that we need to take account of, and I'm mindful that there will be different perspectives on what the issues of equitable funding, the approach to taxation, the approach to sustainability, and I think I wouldn't want to be pressured into making any particular comment on that at this stage, but other to assure the Deputy that given all of the concerns that people are raising around this particular issue, we need to consider a way forward in the round, really, and making sure that we are providing services that are equitable and fair across the piece.
Very well, final supplementary, Deputy Sutton.
A way forward in the round. How about some details, Minister? Are you prepared to commit yourself to stating who is going to fund the health service we have and how you're going to finance the health service that we have in the future? And will you do that before we debate the government plan, which commits us to all sorts of things? When are we going to see any detail about what future health system we're going to have?
Deputy Sutton, through the chair, please. Is the Minister prepared and all of the other things that you managed? Minister.
Thank you, sir. Well, I think what I'd like to assure the Deputy about is that, there is really good progress being made with this work. It is vital. It's a complex exercise. People have attempted to do it before and never followed through, and I very much want to make sure that we conclude the work in the remaining months. But we still have a full range of evidence and data that we've got to pull together, and I think that when we bring some proposals to the Assembly in terms of future options, it will be well informed and help the Assembly make the right way forward. This will not be my decision alone.
Very well.
If I may, sir, will that mean bringing some detail to the House before we debate the government plan?
Yes, that was part of your original question,
It
I
was
think.
indeed, sir.
Are you able to answer that? Will information be made available to members before the debate on the government plan?
I think so. I had actually said previously that this work is going to continue into 2024.
Very well. We come to question 6 that Deputy Coles will ask the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister indicate what traffic monitoring, if any, will be carried out around the vicinity of the Enid Kenno Health and Wellbeing Centre?
Minister.
So, as might be expected, traffic modelling based on the services destined for relocation was carried out at the design stage, and traffic levels in the surrounding area of the facility were monitored to inform us of the likely combined traffic flows. And since the centre opened a month ago, the site manager has carried out informal monitoring of the traffic movements in the roads leading to the centre, and nothing has been reported that gives rise to the need for further monitoring, certainly not at this stage. We're in ongoing discussions with the Roads Committee, and as they are responsible for the roads in the immediate vicinity, and of course it's they who will need to implement any additional measures going forward. So.
Supplementary question, Deputy?
Yes, sir. Given that the Minister himself would like to see this building be used for 25 years after its current model, surely traffic monitoring would, of what it's being currently used for, would provide better data to indicate whether it is viable in such a densely located residential area. Does the Minister not agree?
No, sir, I don't agree. There are a lot of very busy people in the hospital project. They've kept an eye on things. There's no sign of any difficulty at the moment. We're not planning on any radical changes up there at this point in time. I should imagine if we do develop plans to change it radically, then we'll monitor accordingly. But I don't believe in giving busy people jobs to do that aren't necessary, sir.
Very well, we come now to question 7. The Deputy Andrews will ask the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister state if he would support the creation of the scrutiny panel to investigate the barriers and opportunities for people accessing Jersey's labour market? And if not, why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Ordinarily, it's not for me or any other ministers to determine which areas of government should be scrutinised or how scrutiny as a function wishes to organise itself. That is ordinarily the domain of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee and the scrutiny chairs. And so, on the one hand, I feel my view is unnecessary in this area. But turning to the other element of the question is, if I think of it as a standing scrutiny panel, alongside those that we have in standing orders, the 5 scrutiny panels plus PAC, then no, I wouldn't support such a panel, because I don't believe we have a need for another permanent standing scrutiny panel. I believe that those 5 panels plus PAC cover off the work of government quite sufficiently, and having worked in scrutiny very energetically for years, I stand by that. Should scrutiny desire to set up a scrutiny review panel into this subject, then absolutely, that's exactly what review panels are there for. They are there to be used to look into particular subjects on a temporary basis and then stand down again. But I say that, when I say I would support that, is I do so by saying, sir, I would support that if that's what SLC wished to happen. It is their decision to make, and if they wish to look into this area and set up a review panel, that is entirely their decision to make, and I would support that decision, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Andrews? Very well, we come on to question 8 that Deputy Messick will ask the Chief Minister. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Following the announcement that their outline application for the waterfront has been rejected, will the Chief Minister advise if government will re-evaluate the role of the States of Jersey Development Company in delivering projects like this, and consider issuing alternative instructions for any future waterfront development, which include a greater proportion of affordable housing?
As the chair of the Future Places Ministerial Group, I should highlight that the current waterfront scheme was first presented as a planning application in 2021 under the guidance of the previous government. We all want to see progress made towards the redevelopment of the waterfront, providing much needed homes, community facilities, open space and infrastructure improvements for St Helier. The decision highlights to me that there's a wider issue of not historically being joined up on planning and infrastructure matters, a challenge which the Council of Ministers is determined to overcome, considering all elements of how we have reached our current position. And indeed, that is why we have set up the Future Places Ministerial Group. We must work together to get the waterfront development right and deliver something that islanders will enjoy and feel that reflects our modern community and its needs. The Future Places Ministerial Group will reflect on the outcome of this planning application in discussion with SOJDC, including discussing this matter at length when we meet later this week. We do, however, need time to carefully consider what was a detailed report by the planning inspector and the conclusions of the determining panel. These discussions will consider the viability of a greater proportion of affordable housing. This will, of course, need to be considered alongside the level of community infrastructure and investment that we must also deliver for St Helier.
Well, supplemental question.
Thanks. So the Chief Minister in her answer referred to the fact that this project began under the previous government, but she has been in office for a year and there have been plenty of decisions from the previous government that she has overturned, and this could have been one of them, saving us a year of reaching this outcome which many of us regarded as inevitable. So will the Chief Minister, having apparently taken no action whatsoever in this year and a bit in office to prevent this happening earlier, will she give us any assurances that work will be done to ensure that the project, this failed project which commands no public support, is properly cast aside and replaced by something which islanders can be proud of instead?
So I think that's exactly what I just said in my previous answer. If I could repeat what I said, the planning application was submitted in 2021, a long time ahead of the elections. It was put together under the guidance of a previous government, and there is no opportunity for, there has been no opportunity for this current government to engage and modify that since the election. The Deputy obviously has a slightly different view, given his gesticulations and calling across the Assembly, and I look forward to his next question.
Well, there won't be one because we come to question 9. The Connétable St Brelade will ask the Chief Minister. Connétable.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister advise whether the policies adopted by government are intended to reduce the number of private landlords in Jersey? And if not, what measures, if any, are being taken to ensure that this is not the outcome?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Proposals brought forward seek only to ensure that Jersey has a well-regulated rental market which provides safe and secure accommodation for islanders. We are aware that some landlords may be considering their position as these improvements are brought forward. We believe our proposals, notably those in the rented dwellings regulations, are proportionate and will ensure that we are able to properly implement the health and safety standards that already exist for rental accommodation in Jersey. The residential tenancy law consultation earlier this year sought the views of both tenants and landlords at an early stage of policy development. The Minister for Housing and Communities is currently working through the consultation response and will be publishing his response later this autumn. We can't always prevent individual landlords from choosing to leave the market, of course, but this is our duty to ensure that we adopt a proportionate and fair approach to future changes, which I believe we are doing.
Supplemental question, please.
Thank you, sir. Would the Chief Minister agree that the many smaller, that is in terms of properties, landlords, might be a degree fed up with the arrogant attitude adopted by some states members that they are a baying crowd in relation to their resistance to the government's proposals. And would the Chief Minister, sir, agree that these landlords to whom I refer actually provide essential housing in the island at no public cost? Thank you, sir.
I do have to state, of course, that I am a small landlord myself, and that, of course, the details of that appear in my declaration of interest. And so I can tell the constable that I'm not part of a baying mob. I haven't seen them recently either, but I am aware that there are many differing views, and there has been a long-standing debate on these matters, and many attempts to find the right balance in terms of protecting landlords and protecting tenants also. And I believe that we have now found what is a proportionate way to progress to ensure that we do both of those things. And yes, accommodation is of course greatly needed in our community. We prize providing good quality homes so that islanders can thrive and enjoy their life in our island.
Yes, Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. In terms of the model of the private rental sector in Jersey, does the Chief Minister have a policy over whether it's preferable to have a model based on lots of small-time landlords without much professional expertise or flexibility in their financial arrangements versus a model with fewer number of private landlords but who have larger portfolios and are therefore able to benefit from economies of scale and more professionalised services?
Sir, I don't think the Deputy will be surprised by my answer. He'll be very familiar with the fact that I believe in the free market, and therefore, sir, people who wish to make investments in property and to provide accommodation to others through private enterprise is a matter for those people who are willing to enter and participate in the market. Where government comes in is to do exactly what we are proposing to do at the moment, which is to ensure that the playing field is well regulated and that there are appropriate rules, regulations and standards in place for both parties to participate in what is a private agreement between themselves.
Supplemental, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll be forgiven for forgetting the Chief Minister's free market credentials, given the answers we were given to the Jersey Red situation earlier today. But is the Chief Minister saying that she really thinks an approach where the government doesn't attempt to provide some kind of strategy for providing the best private sector rental accommodation model possible is a good strategy, given that the free market approach we've had up until this point has objectively been a complete failure?
As the Deputy states, that is an objective view, sir. It is widely understood and agreed that an appropriate balance needs to be sought in terms of providing appropriate standards of accommodation for everybody who lives in private rented dwellings, and that is exactly what we're determined to do.
Very well, we come final supplementary, Conor Thompson-Bride.
Thank you, sir. Just would the Chief Minister confirm that many of the smaller landlords to whom I've referred earlier have contented tenants within the properties that they rent, and that they are generally better at looking after the properties than perhaps the larger institutional landlords? Would you agree with that, sir?
Sir, whilst I do agree with the constable, I believe that there will always be a mixture in the marketplace, and of course we also benefit in Jersey from a fantastic social housing provider and housing trusts also who operate in a responsible way, and indeed Andean we can all be proud of having met the Better Home Standard for 100% of their properties.
Well, we come now to question 10 that the same Conitab will ask the Minister for Infrastructure. Conitab.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether he is content with the current state of the planted sections between the carriageways of Victoria Avenue, and if not, whether there are any plans for improvement?
Minister.
Sir, I think the constable knows my answer to this question. No, of course, I'm not content with it at all. but he'd be delighted to know that I've already put measures in place to ensure that that doesn't happen again next year. So.
Supplementary, Quinton?
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister agree that since the loss of internal departmental gardening staff and the policy of outsourcing this work, standards have fallen? And if so, what does he plan to do about it? Thank you.
I think I'd refer the Constable to the answer I gave to the question originally. All of those problems have been recognised and measures are being put in place to make sure that there are improvements for next year, sir.
Constable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. It's all very well for the Minister to stand up and say, I think the Constable knows what I think about this, but the rest of us want to know what the Minister thinks about it. Can you please answer the question and tell us, give us an answer to the question that he was asked. Don't just answer the questioner, tell the Assembly and the public.
Sorry, what was the question, Commenter?
I said, sorry, sir, I did say, can he please answer? That was my question. Will he please answer the question? Because he responded to the questioner by saying, the Constable of St Lawrence knows what I think. My question
then the Minister went straight on to say he didn't find it acceptable. In other words, he answered positively what the Constable had asked him.
He didn't find it, but okay, sir, I apologise because I didn't hear that. I will ask him to expand in that case on what he doesn't find acceptable.
Are you able to expand on what you don't find acceptable?
Yes, I think so, but I think the Constable also needs to be corrected in terms of the way I answer the question, sir, because I referred my response to you and not to the Constable. So I think I answered it correctly. I said measures have been put in place. I don't think I can really expand on that. I can tell you a little bit more about the conversation. We've had words with the team, and we're actually going to do those things internally. So more than that, sir, I really can't say. We're going to put the job straight for next year. Maybe the Constable could tell me quite what detail she's expecting from my response.
Well, I'm afraid the Constable can only ask questions. I can't provide information, but supplemental question, Constable.
Yes, sir, I don't. The Minister finds it unacceptable, but what is unacceptable? I've got no idea. We're talking about the vegetation on on Victoria Avenue. Is it that it's hanging over the road? Is it the plants that are growing there? I've got no idea. So there seems to have been maybe a private conversation between the Constable of St Ballard and the Minister for Infrastructure. We're told it's being addressed, but what is being addressed? What is the problem? How is it being addressed? I do apologise, sir. I'm in my older age, I'm getting a little bit hard of hearing, so I apologise to the Minister for thinking that he had directed his answer to the Constable of St Ballard, but apparently he directed it to you, sir.
He did. Minister.
I find it a little surprising that I'm being required to embellish the questioner's question. But I'm quite happy to do that if it's helpful, and say that it's been apparent that a number of the flower beds and the Central Reservation flower beds this year haven't been well maintained. That's been recognised. We have been short-staffed. We've recruited further, and we have plans in place to make sure that that isn't repeated next year, sir.
Deputy Sutton.
Not worth following, but we've got a general description. They've not been well treated, and they're going to be mended. Sorry.
Final supplementary, Constable St Ballard.
Thank you, sir. I would just ask the Minister whether he considers there is sufficient funding in the forthcoming government plan to accommodate an enhanced gardening offering that the island really needs. Thank you, sir.
So like most other departments, I've not been able to obtain the funding that I'd really have liked, but we have had some improvements in our funding, and given the constraints that we all have to suffer, I'm very hopeful that we can achieve that which I've said we'll do.
Well, we come now to question 11 that the Deputy Mezek will ask of the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what consideration he is giving to the form that the government plan's proposed liquid waste charge takes, and can he assure the Assembly that he will not propose a new tax which meets the definition of a regressive tax?
Thank you, sir. The development of a liquid waste charge has not yet commenced and requires State's approval to do so. Minister for Infrastructure will be in the lead as set out in the proposed government plan. We will, as ever, seek to develop taxes and other levies in line with the tax policy principles set out on page 26 of the proposed government plan, and I would expect any charge to be low, broad, simple and fair so that everyone should make an appropriate contribution to the cost of providing services.
Supplementary question.
Thank you, sir. So does that mean, therefore, that we can take it from that answer that the form that the tax will eventually take will not be regressive, i.e. a tax where as the taxable base increases, the effective rate decreases?
So much as I would like to appropriately answer that question, I fear I'm going to be in breach of the previous state's decision, which says that ministers cannot consider a liquid waste charge until the Assembly has made the decision to allow it to consider it. So all I can do at this stage is fall back upon the principles as set out on page 26. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister explain if these taxes on liquid and solid waste are intended to be similar with what used to be the so-called toilet tax imposed on population a few years ago? And does he agree that taxing waste could increase fly tipping or improper disposal of the rubbish on the island?
So there are all sorts of arguments about taxing of solid and liquid waste. The reason that the previous Assembly, I think back in 2016, they decided something in principle and then worked through those principles, and the Assembly didn't approve it. So at that point, the decision was made that ministers would have to come back to the Assembly to be given permission to consider so that those questions can be answered.
Supplemental question, Deputy Kovac.
Thank you. Does the Minister also agree that taxing domestic waste could also have an effect on the inflationary price of housing?
So I'm not sure if I try to avoid answering directly about the form of any charge, whether one could argue that a separate tax or charge for waste was inflationary on the price of housing when the drainage systems and waste systems have to be put into any house which is built. It's about the removal of that waste, and I don't think that that would be directly inflationary upon the price of housing, or I find it difficult to see that it would at this point.
Well, final supplementary, Deputy Mesny.
Thank you, sir. The Minister will remember his previous attempts to introduce a commercial waste charge, which was defeated in this Assembly, and for some of those who voted against it did so on the basis that it was a tax based on use rather than the profitability of those businesses, and hence a concern of the negative economic impact such a tax would have. Could he confirm whether he's learnt the lessons from that debate and will ensure that if he does seek to come back with any proposals for a liquid waste charge, that it will take into account those views expressed then and will not be one which risks causing economic damage by taxing use rather than profits?
So, of course, I could flippantly say I have learnt the lesson. That's why I said the Minister for Infrastructure will be leading. The reality is that these are complex matters, and I have no doubt that the Minister and all members of the Council of Ministers and this Assembly, if the states agree to allow ministers to consider such a charge, they will be taking into consideration the matters that the Deputy raises.
Well, we come now to question 12 that Deputy Coles will ask the Minister for the Environment. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister indicate what air quality monitoring, if any, will be carried out in the vicinity of the Enid Kenno Health and Wellbeing Centre?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So historically, air quality was monitored at the old Le Canave school site using what's known as a passive diffusion tube as part of the island-wide air quality monitoring programme. Diffusion tubes measure pollution cumulatively over a period of time. They don't measure short-term peaks and troughs. The site when it was a school, had a long-term trend of good air quality. As an example, in 2020, the annual nitrogen dioxide mean, the average was 5.1 micrograms per cubic metre, and for comparison, the EU limit is 40 micrograms per cubic metre, so well underneath the EU standards. The diffusion tube for that site was moved to the new school when it opened in 2021. So there is an option for officers to re-site a diffusion tube at the Enid Kenno Health and Wellbeing Centre, which would enable comparison with historic data from the time when it was a school. However, with limited resources and in the knowledge that previous data did not indicate a significant air quality issue at the site, the decision will depend on managing the monitoring assets that we have and putting them in places of greatest risk.
Supplemental question.
Yes, thank you, sir. Given that the building has changed purpose, so where a school would have had peak periods of AM and PM and possibly would have had a larger concentration of students walking there, now to a wellbeing centre to cater for all islanders coming from east and west, that the increase in traffic in the area may affect the data results. So therefore, would the Minister then maybe put a point that the air quality may have changed, and therefore when the resource becomes available, it should be there to check and compare?
So as I indicated previously, I'm certainly prepared to consider it. I have been to a couple of meetings, public meetings, with residents who have, with the Infrastructure Minister, who have raised concerns about traffic issues on the site as the change of use. I would say that the last meeting we went to last week indicated a considerable easing of those concerns. There has been, as the Infrastructure Minister mentioned in a previous answer, monitoring carried out during the first month of operation of the site, and the traffic issues have not been significant yet. But we both will stand to react should there be changes in that situation. I think the team running the hospital have a very acute sense of the fact that they are operating in a residential neighbourhood, and will certainly alert us should there be issues which, in terms of air quality, would relate to traffic. But at the moment, we don't see a huge issue that would need responding to.
Deputy.
So I'm not sure how the health department can alert us to air quality issues in Clos de Sable near the old school if the air quality monitoring has been removed. So does the Minister accept, not just as a Minister but also as a St Brelard representative, that it stands to reason that traffic flows will increase to the area, and that actually residents' concerns haven't diminished? Actually, at the end of the meeting, which we were both at, there were repeated concerns about traffic calming measures in the area. So would the Minister agree that actually it shouldn't be a choice of an either-or between whether the air monitoring goes on at the new Le Canave school or the old one, that actually it very much needs an air quality control monitor now in order to assess whether the situation changes?
So there are a few premises in that question that I'd have issue with. I don't think it is automatically the case that there will be increases in air pollution due to traffic. Traffic in the school period was dominated by peaks of traffic during the beginning and end of the school day. The traffic now is spread out over the day. That is likely to lead to greater dispersion of pollution and less likelihood of concentrations building up over short periods of time. But as I have said twice now, I stand ready to react should we need to put in, should there be an indication that traffic levels are building up, and traffic is the key issue since that is the source of potential pollution. And the question of whether we should do it as well as is fine in principle, but we do have limited resources. Therefore, choices have to be made. And in this case, the choice will be on the risk assessment basis of where do the greatest risks lie. We're currently investigating the siting of, in fact, about to put in sensors, new sensors, as part of a new sensor network around some schools in St Helier. There's some sensors going in, I think, around Helvetia School in relation to the traffic scheme that's been proposed there, so that we can have information for that. There's also proposals to put in air quality monitors around the other schools in town. I'd be very happy to brief either the Deputy or the Assembly as a whole about that new sensor network, which I think is a significant move forward and is something of which we're very much looking forward to the results of getting that in place.
Supplemental question, Deputy Chairman.
Yes, sir. I feel like we're in a chicken and egg situation here. Le Kennervay is one of the most concentrated residential areas in the island, and certainly the most in St Brelard. And in order to say that we'll monitor the situation to see if air quality deteriorates, but we won't be able to monitor it because we haven't got anything to monitor it with, but I'm willing to react if I'm asked to do so. Well, the Minister is being asked to do so now, I think by members in the Assembly, where there was monitoring before, and we know that there's change in traffic. And so rather than speculating, will the Minister respond to my request, if nobody else's request, to immediately put back the air quality monitoring in Le Kennervay so that we can actually have real-time data to see what the changes are, whether it's got worse or better?
So it's not a chicken and egg situation. The situation is to do with traffic. We know what the traffic situation is because it has been monitored for the last month. We also know that in a previous situation when there was a lot of traffic movements connected with the school, the data suggests that the pollution levels around the school were 1/8 of the EU limit, very, very much below. Therefore, we have to take a decision about where best to put resources. They can be moved around. I'm certainly prepared to consider moving them around, but I would have to say that this is not a decision just about putting something at Le Kennervay. It is a decision about taking it away from somewhere else, for example, the current school. So it is a choice. It is not just a case of saying we'll just go and find another one from the back of our pockets and find another diffusion sensor and put it in there. We might also want to take a more targeted approach and put in one of the new sensors which measures peaks and troughs rather than average sensors. So that is something that we should look at. But we will look at it in the round because we need to consider all the sites which we would want to monitor. And as I say, my starting point is that the background levels at that site over many years have been below, but well below what would be considered dangerous limits. And we have other sites which are at risk, and we're monitoring the traffic, so we will know if there is the potential for the main source of pollution to have increased, and in that situation, we can react.
Conrad Harbison Brelard.
Thank you, sir. Given the movement these days from hydrocarbon-powered vehicles to electric vehicles, has the Minister got evidence of a reduction in pollution levels? Thank you, sir.
So that is a very broad question indeed. And
Also, I'm not sure it's within the terms of the original question, Conrad. I mean, this relates to monitoring carrying out in the vicinity of the Enid Kenno Health and Wellbeing Centre, not general information sought about air quality or monitoring in connection with electric vehicles.
So my point is, if I may, that in the light of more electric vehicles appearing on the market, will the effect of those vehicles reduce the potential for air pollution in the area of the Enid Kenno Centre?
Thank you very much. That is an acceptable question. Yes.
Yes, sir. In principle, of course, certain emissions would reduce with the increase in EVs. Not all emissions. Some of them are to do with brake dust and tyre wear. But certainly the things that we currently monitor for, nitrogen, nitrogen oxides, particulates, and one other thing I've forgotten, would be carbon compounds. Then we would be able to, then there would be a reduction of that, and that would be welcome, and is indeed a generally welcome background, generally welcome outcome of the move to EVs. Of course, we are also trying, and I know the health team are trying very much to encourage people to travel to the Enid Kenno Centre either by, certainly in terms of staff, by bicycle or foot. And there is also a bus service which has been diverted into the estate to service the hospital. And again, people are being encouraged to monitor that. So I think on lots of grounds, we could hope in the future that there will be slightly less pollution in that area.
Supplemental question, Conrad?
I thank the Minister for the answer, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And given that the Minister for Infrastructure said there was going to be no formal traffic monitoring, and the evidence that is currently gathered seems to be mostly anecdotal from a member of staff, would the Minister indicate what the trigger would be to see air quality monitoring take place?
So there's a very active community forum in the Clodagh Sab and in the estate area around that, and they have no hesitation in letting us know when issues have arisen. And we have a member in the infrastructure team who, in the health team, who will be, who has an overall responsibility, I believe, to sort of manage the relationships in the area along with other work that they do. I don't have any doubt at all that if there are a spike in issues relating to traffic and therefore air quality or other things that might affect air quality, that we would know about it. And I repeat that I would certainly be happy to do that monitoring work should we feel that there's a reason to move urgently in that area. Otherwise, it will be considered along with the general programme of sighting of monitors that we do, sighting of monitors that we're doing, and will, I'm sure, become part of that programme, as particularly as schools and health facilities are priorities for us in terms of measuring air quality. So, you know, it is certainly something we're going to watch, and I'm absolutely convinced that the triggers will reach us very, very quickly should that happen.
Thank you very much. As we come to question 13, the Deputy Scott will ask of His Majesty's Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. Will His Majesty's Attorney General advise whether or not legal advice given to States members and government officers by the Law Officers Department on their interpretation of Jersey law and statute and the legal reasoning for that interpretation is disclosable to members of the public, and if not, why not? And will he advise whether there are any circumstances when disclosure could be made on the grounds of public interest?
Jenny.
Microphone appears not to be working.
It's the one next to you. There you can.
Thank you. So the answer to the first question of whether legal advice given by law officers to States members and government officers on the interpretation of Jersey law is disclosable to the public is no, it's not. So law officers' advice is confidential. So the answer to the second question as to why it's not disclosable is because of legal privilege, and specifically law officer legal advice privilege, which is a particular type of legal privilege. And so in a recent decision of the Office of the Information Commissioner, law officer privilege was described as the long-standing constitutional convention that government does not reveal whether law officers have or have not advised on a particular issue or the content of such advice without law officers' consent. The purpose of this confidentiality is to protect fully informed decision-making by allowing government to seek legal advice in private without fear of adverse inferences being drawn from either the content of that advice or the fact that it was being sought. It ensures government is neither discouraged from seeking legal advice in appropriate cases nor pressurised to seek advice in appropriate cases. So the privilege plays an important role in good governance because it enables law officers in complete confidence to give uninhibited and sometimes difficult advice to public law decision makers without about legal risk and legal difficulties. And so the third and final question about whether publication could be made on grounds of public interest, So I can't immediately, and I'm thinking in a vacuum, but I can't immediately think of a public interest which would be served by such publication. I can only think that publication would serve third parties' private interests, because, for example, a person with a private cause considers that their private interests will be advanced by them being able to cite a law officer's legal opinion in support of their private cause. Thanks, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Scott.
Yes, sir. Given that states members often witness great efforts being made by members of the public to understand how legal statutes might be interpreted and Jersey law might be interpreted, and that, as I understand from the Attorney General, that it is possible for legal privilege to be waived with consent of law officers, can the Attorney General accept that there could be grounds on public interest where it will not necessarily, in terms of just providing clarity on the situation, for the legal interpretation of statute as it is understood by law officers to be disclosed?
Well, so I think the answer to that was probably largely covered by my second and third answers to the questions originally raised by the Deputy. But to expand on those, what is important about the interpretation of Jersey law and Jersey statutes is the decisions of the courts. And those are public, they're published on the website, and they are accessible by private individuals, whether they choose to involve a lawyer in advising them on the particular question on which they are concerned, or whether they seek legal aid to do so, or they go to the Free Representation Unit or other organisations. But law officers' role is not to provide a general free legal advice service to members of the public. Its role is to advise states members, government decision makers about matters of public concern. It's not to provide some sort of private legal advice service to members of the public. And if we were to do so, it would make our jobs very difficult indeed, because it would create conflicts of interest with those third parties, and we would always be concerned, and the government members, government officials who we advise would always be concerned whether our advice is going to be published to the public. So that relationship of confidentiality, where a client comes to a lawyer in complete confidence and can disclose everything that they need to disclose in order to give advice, and the advice that is given confidentially in return would just be undermined if our advice becomes disclosable.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. There is a precedent in the Commonwealth and indeed in the British Isles for legal advice to ministers having been disclosed, and of course that example is perhaps most high-profilely known, if you excuse the clumsy English, in the Goldsmiths' advice to Tony Blair during the Iraq War. So although the precedent is absolutely that in most cases legal advice remains privileged, if there's an overwhelming judgment that it's in the public interest to disclose, that can be published. So my question to the Attorney General, sir, is under the Freedom of Information Law, I know that when it was originally drafted, there were two categories of qualified exempt and absolute exempt. Could he just remind us which category legal advice falls into, if it's the former or the latter?
So it's generally the former.
So given that, sir, if it's qualified exempt, that if there's an overriding public interest, legal advice that's given to ministers or to States Assembly members could be released in certain circumstances?
Well, that's correct, but that would have to be assessed by the Information Commissioner in each case. But whilst I accept that war in Iraq is a matter of overriding public interest. I haven't yet come across a situation that's comparable to war in Iraq, and that is why my overriding points about the importance of maintaining confidentiality of legal advice for those whom we serve with that advice is paramount.
Final supplementary, Deputy Scull.
Yes, sir. Given that recently the Guernsey government disclosed information from its law officers regarding the interpretation of the proceeds of crime law in the context of international treaties and whether there is a conflict or not, would the Attorney General perhaps come back to the point of whether there could be any circumstance which is mentioned in the third part of the question, whether that is in terms of a period of time, in terms of an interval, any circumstance in which he could contemplate that, notwithstanding some of the concerns and risks about disclosing information a certain way, whether these opinions might be, and accepting that they are opinions, that these opinions might be disclosed, and whether, in the absence of doing so, there could be a concern that government might be perceived as avoiding challenge.
So in relation to the disclosure by Guernsey law officers, I have to say I'm not familiar with that particular disclosure. I don't know its details, but it may have been that disclosure was made with the consent of the Guernsey law officers. That's quite possible. And in relation to the Deputy's more general question, look, I would concede, yes, there are possible circumstances where, with our consent, yes, our advice may be disclosed. But so far, I've not come across one of those, with the exception of course, of what I'm just doing now, the advice in the Assembly that I do give in public. But I'm not aware of one circumstance in 8 years of being a law officer which has justified private advice given outside the floor of the Assembly being published.
We come to the final question that Deputy Andrews will ask the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister confirm what public provisions are in place for the disposal of sharp boxes used for the disposal of hypodermic needles and other sharp medical instruments, and whether she believes such provisions to be adequate?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to the Deputy for his question. Short bins are collected and replaced by staff from all of the treating departments within HCS, and these include places like rheumatology, neurology and diabetes, and then they dispose of them through the accepted routes in terms of disposal of clinical waste. Users are advised of the correct process for the disposal of sharps. But we're also currently reviewing the approach that we're taking, because we've now got a variation in the process for those services which are now operating from the Enid Kenno Health and Wellbeing Centre. So in direct response to the Deputy's question, I won't be satisfied until we've actually got a review completed of those arrangements, and that we can maintain public safety in that respect. I can advise him that private establishments such as GPs have their own arrangements for sharp disposal.
Supplemental question.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I was wondering whether the Minister would be in support of having a central location for the disposal of such waste in St Helier. Because I know some people, for instance, who may be disabled, might not have the access to go to Llanelli, and they might struggle. So I was just wondering if the Minister could provide clarity on that. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think the Deputy raises an interesting question. I think the important thing is to reduce the period of time and the distance that these shops need to be transported. So we are going to review the locations across the island. I think just to centralise it in St Helier may not be just the option or that we might pursue. But I think I will take note of what he's considered for St Helier in particular. And when the review has been completed, we can actually provide a map for Ireland as to where these facilities will be available, and that will become a lot clearer for people.
Deborah.
Thank you. It's just really a follow-on to say that if the Minister could look at a central location, because I think now that services have been repurposed over at Lake Hennive, it is quite a long way for people to go and quite awkward for them. So I would like to ask if the Minister could please consider this very carefully. Thank you.
Minister,
Thank you. Yes, I'll be happy to.
Thank you. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister be open to the negotiations with the Minister for Infrastructure as the clinical waste incinerator based at La Collette could welcome deposits from private sharps boxes?
Well, I think until the review is complete, we don't really know what it is we need to do. But clearly, in terms of the Minister's responsibilities for waste, if there's a need to actually enter into those discussions, certainly I think we could work together on that.
Supplemental question, Deputy Coles. Deputy Tadier.
Does the Minister believe that there may be a need for different approaches to be taken, whether or not the sharps originate from prescription medicines or from illegal drug usage? And if so, will that be taken into account about the possible placing of sharps boxes and also the confidentiality around the disposal and use of the public?
Thank you, sir. Well, we already have areas where perhaps there may well be issues of confidentiality, particularly around addiction services. And there is a needle exchange service that's operated by the Addiction Service, and very clear processes and procedures in place for the disposal of sharps and how users of the service are supported to dispose of their kit safely. We've also got places in A&E and in the hospital and certain pharmacies across the island. And one of the things I think is that because the deputies raised a question, we will have a look at whether this meets the requirements around safe and effective disposal and the test for accessibility for people. I personally think that to centralise things may actually disadvantage some people. So I would much rather talk to those who are in receipt of shops, needing to use shops to be able to get their views as to what's the best way forward on this.
Supplemental question, Deputy. Final supplementary, Deputy Andrews. Thank you very much. Very well, that ends questions with notice. We now come on to a period of questions without notice. The first question period is for the Minister for External Relations. Who will be answering for the Minister for External Relations? Chief Minister. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Not wishing to spoil the natural high I'm sure that ministers are feeling after spending a few days at Tory party conference, but could I ask them to update the Assembly on discussions that they had with their close colleagues and comrades over those few days, and if there was any particular strategy they employed in deciding how to engage with people who are likely to be in opposition in the next year?
I thank the Deputy for his question. Of course, Jersey attends all party conferences actually under international passes because we consider it important to engage with all members of the political process in the United Kingdom. An official went to the party conference for the Liberal Democrats, and myself and the Assistant External Relations Minister will be travelling to Liverpool on Sunday to attend the Labour Party conference. We enjoyed a very good level of engagement in Manchester this week, and were able to meet with a number of backbench and ministerial members of that party to discuss a variety of issues. Particularly at the moment, it's important to talk about the CPTPP, which is a matter of interest, and Jersey and Guernsey were really pleased with the engagement that we had on that matter, and were able to speak with not only the Secretary of State in an informal setting, but other ministers as well to raise our presence and to engage with them.
Supplemental, Deputy Minister?
Thank you, sir. Could I ask the Chief Minister if any discussions were had at this conference with members of the current government on the Illegal Migration Act and its application to Jersey, bearing in mind that this is an act which has been extremely contentious in the UK because of strong and, in my view, founded perceptions of the racist impact that this law may have, which does mention the Channel Islands in it. Could she explain to the Assembly if this came up at all?
Short answer is no, sir. That was not raised in our discussions.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And I'm glad it's the Chief Minister who's answering questions for external relations this week. It gives me the opportunity to follow on regarding Gibraltar and no longer underwriting insurance for Crown dependencies. Is the Minister for External Relations able to provide any updates on this and any other jurisdiction potentially stopping underwriting for the Channel Islands?
Thank you. And I would like to point out that the external relations portfolio is a concurrent matter for both the Chief Minister and the External Relations Minister. That's a constitutional position, not only here, but in other places. And so it's absolutely ordinary that a head of government would speak on such matters, because, of course, we also engage with our international partners concurrently with the External Relations team. So to refer to the specific question in relation to insurance, unfortunately, I do not have at the moment an update for the Deputy, but I will get one to him and will share that with other members if they are interested.
Supplemental question, Deputy Cole?
Yes, sir. Can the Chief Minister please acknowledge that whether or not this has made it onto the corporate risk register, and if so, what has it been flagged as?
I'm not aware that it has at this point, no.
Colin Tarberson-Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Jersey has an office in London, and it's been intimated that it needs funds spending on it. Would the Chief Minister explain to members what needs to be done in the office and how much it might cost? Thank you, sir.
I thank the Constable for the question. Of course, like any good use of property, it sometimes does need a little updating. And I believe that there are some minor, mostly cosmetic updates required as the lease that was due to expire has been continued. I don't have the exact figure to hand, but I do believe that it's a relatively modest amount, and of course we will be seeking best possible value for that work when it is carried out.
Supplemental comment.
Is the Chief Minister, sir, aware of the length of the new lease being signed? Thank you, sir.
That is not a level of detail that I have to hand, I'm afraid. It's largely an operational matter.
Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And I too am glad that it's the Chief Minister answering for the External Relations Minister today, in that she might have more knowledge than most about what possible or what likely date we're likely to see the return of the External Minister to his post.
So I'm sure all members of the Assembly wish the Deputy well and hope that he continues to make a good recovery. And we all hope that he will be able to return to work within the coming month.
Supplemental question? Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. Given that Jersey's government is seeking to do more business directly where it can with its close neighbours, including in Europe, what consideration has been given to requiring or encouraging candidates who apply for posts in high civil service roles across different departments to have capacity in more than one language?
It's a very good question from the Deputy, and of course, as the President of the local branch of the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie, a very appropriate question, and so I thank him. I do believe that recently that we have tried with one particular role to ensure that advertising is done in Europe as well as on normal platforms. And we, of course, do have some people who speak other languages in our teams. We work particularly closely with the team in Caen, who support ourselves and Guernsey also, and native French speakers. And, of course, it is languages are seen as a great attribute to many roles within our public service.
Supplemental question,
I'm encouraged, I think, in part to hear that response. Would the Chief Minister take back the idea and perhaps also speak to State's Employment Board that when it comes to recruiting at a high level across all sorts of different departments, that the ability to speak another European language to a high level would be advantageous to Jersey's interests in the medium and longer term, and discuss how that might be implemented appropriately?
Indeed, I will, sir. It is, of course, always a matter of interest for us to look not only at English-speaking countries when considering policy, but we regularly look to other nations with other languages. And as the Deputy, I'm sure, will appreciate and agree, Google Translate is sometimes not the best avenue for understanding and digging into another language's documents.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I just wondered if the ministers, the external Minister for External Relations officers are doing any work to enable direct reporting in respect of local medicinal cannabis manufacturing prescription to the UN's International Narcotics Control Board.
I believe that's a matter for the licensing of cannabinoids is a matter for another department, and so I don't think it would be appropriate in this line of questioning.
Supplemental question to that, Deputy Scott?
So I was asking the question in relation to the current position where where the Home Office is assuming responsibility for this matter, and wondered whether any change from this position is being considered.
I don't have an update for the Deputy.
Any other questions for the Chief Minister in lieu of the Minister for External Relations? No? Very well. We move on to the next question period, which was the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Bezic.
Thank you, sir. Could I ask the Minister if she has the full backing of the Council of Ministers for the new dementia strategy, which is planned to be completed by the end of the year? And could she elaborate on when exactly that strategy will be implemented and if it will need to come before the States Assembly?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I do believe that there is support for it. This has been a piece of work that's been going on for quite a long time and is nearing completion. One of the things that I think it raises is some of the constraints that we have in the island, particularly for meeting the needs of patients with dementia, from both a health and a social care perspective. And what I am aware of is that when this strategy comes to fruition, it will need to be discussed because it will have much broader implications for not only health services, but for the wider portfolios that are covered in some of the council responsibilities. And also, what's important is that we don't just think of dementia as a health condition, but actually as a social care condition.
Supplemental question.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister inform the Assembly if, in the work that is currently being undertaken to put this strategy together, and taking account of the fact that dementia is one of the fastest growing causes of premature death in Jersey, whether this strategy is doing any modelling for assessing what profile of needs there will be in future years, and whether the Health and Community Services Department will have the resources to provide the care that's needed by those living with living with this disease.
Thank you, sir. Yes, there is some delay in some of the work, and this is due to the fact that we have had some resource issues in actually being able to present the work on cost and bed modelling. But we are anticipating that this work will be done by December. And as the Deputy will know, a lot of the work is being done in co-production with people who are utilising services, their families' carers and formal care providers. And in that regard, we need to take account of not only the modelling, but also their views, with a view to making sure that the finalisation of that strategy remains on track to be produced by March next year.
Very well. Deputy Sutton.
Page 88 of the government plan states the following. The ageing demographic is increasing the cost of health services in the island, including the costs met by the Health Insurance Fund. These pressures will continue to increase in coming years. Changes will be needed to pay for the future healthcare costs in a sustainable way. What sustainable changes has she got in mind at this stage?
Well, as the Deputy will know, that one of the things that the service is affected by at the moment is a significant overspend, and that there have been forensic examination of the reasons for this, so that we can get a much better understanding of where costs fall and what investment is needed in future healthcare going forward. And the Deputy will know clearly that one of the pieces of work that I alluded to in my earlier question was designed to get us on a footing or a place where we can actually be clear about what kind of investment we need to make in healthcare over a much longer period of time, rather than have to, from year to year to year, address just annual deficits. So a key part of this work is the work that has been done on the Jersey Health Account, and that work has been undertaken to forecast the future costs of care, and it takes account of health inflation and demographic changes. And once we're in a position to have all of that work completed, and for the advice that I mentioned previously that we're seeking from the economics unit, I expect that we will have some options to present to the Assembly on the future funding of healthcare during 2024.
Supplemental question?
Yes, sir. In the deficit, what role does the dependence on agency workers throughout the hospital play in increasing the size of that deficit?
Well, it plays a significant part. As the Deputy knows, we have got ongoing workforce challenges, and in order to maintain service continuity, there are times when we do need to call on locum support to provide that continuity of care. But what the department is actively doing at the moment is trying to encourage people to convert their locum post into a permanent post. And I don't actually have the numbers available to me today, but I'm happy to provide them at some point in the future, which is that we are having some success in attracting people to stay, and this clearly will have a reduction, have an impact on the reduction of our locum spend going forward. It is really critical to the financial turnaround that we get our workforce plan and our recruitment and our handling of the workforce challenges under control, so that we can make sure that we're not building up any further pressures going forward.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I was pleased to see yesterday's announcement that a motor neurone nurse will be secured till the end of this year. But I note also that there was a statement from the Chief Officer of Health which said that this valuable service will be considered as part of the HCS financial planning process for 2024. And he went on to say, we hope this reassures patients, carers and families. On that last point, I don't see how that statement can reassure patients, carers and families, because it says that we'll consider this in 2024 to be funded. Can the Health Minister give more of a clear assurance that actually that the funding for the MND nurse won't be cut, but will be continued into 2024 and beyond, because we are only less than 3 months away from the beginning of 2024 now?
Thank you, sir. Yes, I met with the colleagues, representatives from the Motor Neurone Disease Association during the week, and can confirm that that funding will remain. The interpretation of that is that there has been no forward planning for the continuation of the post on a regular basis, but following our commitment to the MND Association this week, this will become part of our regular commitment to them. And what we will need to do is make sure that that's reflected in our long-term financial planning going forward.
Yeah, can I thank the Minister for that? I'm reassured by that statement. Could I ask then that she updates, puts a new statement out to reflect the fact that this position isn't just under consideration, but it's formal government policy to propose this, presumably that's within their gifts, and that to give further reassurance to all involved in that area of care.
Minister.
Yes, I can do that, sir. Thank you. Yes, I'm more than happy to do that.
Conatable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. In answer to a written question that I submitted, we have learned from the Minister that the, excuse me, the radiology department, as at the 15th of September, has almost 5,500 examinations waiting, including CT scans, MRIs, ultrasounds, and X-rays. We are told that that does not differentiate between first appointments, those which have been cancelled or postponed, and 6-month follow-ups. Nevertheless, there are almost 5,500 patients waiting for an appointment at the radiology department. Will the Minister give us her opinion on this, please, sir?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I share the Constable's concerns about this, and I find that the way in which the arrangements for scanning services have been organised to date has not been optimal or indeed acceptable. And as part of the turnaround work, this is now a priority for the turnaround team, which is to focus on waiting times for investigations and diagnostics. And what I have been assured during this week, in particular to MRI scanning, is that there is now a plan in place where we can engage a second scanner, and that we can start to bring some of the timings of those investigations that people are waiting for with the ambition to offer that at a 6-week waiting time by the end of the year. And I'm really pleased that we've been able to address this in this way. I also think for the information for the Assembly that the way in which we collect data and evidence about how things are organised, as you've heard me repeatedly said before, our performance systems are way short of what we need to do. So some of the manual collection of this information is also poor. And what I'm hoping that we can also address is the openness and the transparency of that through the electronic now systems that we're putting in place. And what the public will be able to see on a regular basis, which will be part of the monthly reporting through the board process, is just how much those waiting times are improving, or whether are deteriorating waiting times the reason for doing that, and to try and bring some openness and transparency to the way in which the department is operating.
Supplementary, sir?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I'm sure the Minister will recognise the anxiety that patients have when they are waiting to be called for an appointment for an ultrasound or MRI scan. And we've just heard her mention how she is trying to mitigate the waiting list for MRI scans. Will she tell us what the target is that she is hoping to achieve for first-time appointments for all of these examinations within the radiology department, please, sir? Because I am aware of people waiting for well over 6 months.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Yes, and the Constable is absolutely correct in that. And I've had a number of complaints and concerns raised by islanders to this effect. I haven't actually set any waiting time target yet because I want to get a much better understanding of what the actual wait is. And as I've said, the turnaround team are actually going through that as we speak. But we will, as part of our strategy for improving things going forward, start to set some really clear targets for waiting times. Clearly, there are capacity issues at the moment because we are subject to variation when we cannot recruit a member of staff to operate the service. But as I've said, that is a focus for our attention to try and improve the recruitment, trying to get some sustainability in there and to get a pattern of service that allows us to set some reasonable targets for waiting times.
Perhaps time for a quick question, Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. Please can the Minister state whether, following the move of services to the Enid Kenno Centre, consideration has been given to reopening the 14 beds on Sambray to help with rehabilitation and to help free up beds in the General Hospital for patients with delayed discharge? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, and thank you to the Deputy. We've been tracking the number of patients who are in need of rehabilitation, and officers are telling me that this is currently running between 4 and 10 patients on average. So there is no plan to extend the rehabilitation provision at Samaray, but there is a plan to address, as she quite rightly points out, the number of people whose transfer of care is delayed. And I met last week with the Jersey Care Federation and intend to meet with others too, to understand what the capacity issues are in relation to the sector being either able or unable to accept referrals from the hospital, and have also requested officers to review the current discharge coordination arrangements, which I feel are inadequate at this moment in time, so that we can start to get some agreement and some clarity both between the independent sector and the private sector who provide care going forward, and also the hospital as to how they can improve the pathway of care for people. I am really concerned that keeping people in hospital unnecessarily is leading to an increase in falls. And I have some of the data that tells me that is going on, and that may well be an indicator for improvements in rehabilitation care, but as yet I can't make any assessment of that.
I'm afraid that brings a time for this Minister to an end.
Can I just say, I don't think the Minister answered the question. I just said, will she consider opening the 14 beds that are on Samaray that are there, and there is the space for patients to go
Minister,
there?
will you consider opening the 14 beds in Samaray, if you didn't answer that part of the question?
Thank you, sir. I think the team are currently looking at what capacity they have in order to plan future bed requirements. If there is a need to open them, we will. If there isn't, we will not.
Very well. We now come to the remaining question period, which is for the Chief Minister. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. On page 55 of the government plan, her government plan, it says the objective by 2027 is to have restored trust and accountability in government. Does that mean she, in the year she's been in power, she's actually lost the trust of the people?
The Deputy will recall that when we entered government, we set out as one of our objectives to restore trust, trust that had it appeared from the conversations many of us had with islanders on the doorsteps during this election. That trust had sadly been eroded, and that is that process of regaining trust is an ongoing process, and I believe that it is one as trust is earned that we continue to include in our government plan and include in our objectives, because it is an important part of our work in representing islanders.
Supplemental, Deputy?
So the absence of trust is down to her predecessors and not to her.
I wasn't aware that that was a question. It seemed more of a statement, sir. As I said, I do believe that that is the case. During the last term, it appeared that there was some erosion of public trust, that for many reasons, and it is part of our ongoing objective to, through our actions, build a greater engagement with islanders and to rebuild trust in the work of this Assembly and in government.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. As a self-confessed free marketeer, will the Chief Minister therefore be opposing any proposals that come from the Housing Minister's White Paper, which is very clear that it seeks to impose caps on how much rents in the private sector can be increased by?
So the Housing White Paper covers a number of issues, and as I stated earlier, the most important matter is that we ensure that there is a balance and that the relevant protections are provided for both tenants and landlords so that they can engage in a reasonable private agreement when they access private rented dwellings.
Sir, following a question about trust in politicians, that wasn't anything even vaguely approaching an answer to my question.
I can expand on the economy.
Yes or no will do.
Well, I think the Deputy will be aware that that is not my preferred option, but I do... Well, we are aware that housing issues, the cost of housing is an issue for islanders, and it has added to the stress that islanders are experiencing. However, it is not my view that there are successful examples of rent controls when one looks at other nations around the globe.
Thank you, sir. It sounds like she hasn't read the consultation because it explains some of those successful examples around the world. So is it not the case then we have a chief minister who takes a public position which is in opposition to that which her own housing minister is consulting on? And how would she say that that will improve trust in politics by consulting on things that the government actually has no intention of doing because they're ideologically opposed?
Sir, I think we've covered this matter previously. Consultation is a consultation and a looking at views and an opportunity to engage with islanders to hear what they think.
I'm sorry,
touched on
I
this
think could we keep the comments down and let the Chief Minister answer the question, please? Chief Minister.
I have nothing further to add, sir.
Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister inform the Assembly what priorities have been agreed with the new interim CEO to deliver in his term of office?
Thank you, sir. We have agreed 5 objectives for the first quarter of the CEO's time in office, and we will be sharing those shortly with the PAC and publicly.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, sir. Could I ask the Chief Minister why she is unable to confirm those 5 objectives publicly to the Assembly now?
I don't have them in front of me, sir, is my simple answer. As the Deputy is well aware, and the Chair of PAC, the recruitment of the Chief Executive was quite focused. It set some objectives which were to focus on performance management and amongst other things, and to improve the productivity of our public service. And so those will be reflected in the 5 objectives.
Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. On the Jersey Evening Post in July, the Council of Ministers had an advertising line titled "Empowering Islanders by Easing the Cost of Living," where they said they are dedicated to implementing measures that alleviate the burden on your wallet. Then on the Government Engagement Network report, R136, the Council of Ministers said they are planning regular engagement in consultation activities with the public on matters related to them. Based on these statements, can the Chief Minister explain how the new proposed taxes on domestic and commercial waste would fit into alleviating the burden on people's wallets, and what engagement and consultation on the effect of such taxes on population has been done or is planned to be done?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I didn't quite catch where the Deputy found this publication, but I think I understand the general emphasis of her question, which is about increasing charges in an environment where people are experiencing straitened financial times, and we of course have committed to helping to reduce the burden of the cost of living to islanders. And of course, every decision that is taken with that absolute priority in mind. And it would not be an easy position to take in this environment, because we have been focusing on, as the Deputy rightly identified, reducing the burden on islanders, increasing the amount of money they have in their pockets through increasing tax allowances, for example, increasing the community cost bonus, and as we heard yesterday with the publication of the Employment Forum's report, increasing minimum wage.
Supplemental question,
The second part of the question wasn't responded. If any consultation on the effect such taxes effect on the population has been done or is planned?
I believe I did answer that question.
Do you have
Has any consultation?
Do you have a supplemental question?
So, like with many consultations and surveys done in the last years, the public complains that many were not advertised visibly enough or for too short periods, so most of them see it after the closing date and can't contribute in time. Will the Chief Minister commit to look into the consultation process with the Communication Department and make sure consultation links and information are provided also more directly to the people involved?
There is an engagement framework, sir, and there are, of course, consultation guidelines for officials to follow when sharing a consultation with the public. If there are concerns about the way that that has been done, of course, I'm happy to look into it with Deputy Stevenson, who has that responsibility.
Conor St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. Further to news that many post offices in the urban areas of Jersey are closing down. Will the Chief Minister intervene between the Co-op and mediate between the Co-op and Jersey Post to move this impasse? I understand the Co-op is offering space in their stores free of charge. Thank you, sir.
I thank the Constable for the question. Of course, access to post offices are an important feature in community life. And my understanding is that as a result of the conversations with Jersey Post and the Co-op, and there will remain, and I believe some parish halls, there will remain 12 community post office facilities around the island, and that is considered to be an appropriate level of service so that islanders can use those services at convenient locations.
Supplemental question, Conor.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, sir, many of the post offices have already closed. We're losing all of our urban banks, and now we're losing many of our urban post offices. I think this government and many people in the island have forgotten service to the community and esprit de corps. Does the Chief Minister not agree?
As I said, sir, we do take this matter very seriously and are concerned about it. That's why I can recall and share with the Constable that we are aware that there will remain in service 12 community postal services around the island.
Deputy Balash.
So the Illegal Migration Act 2023 of the United Kingdom was given royal assent on the 20th of July, and sections 31 to 37 of that act purport to apply directly to the Channel Islands. Can the Chief Minister say whether the government was consulted on this matter? And could she also say, given that the Chief Minister has a duty under the States of Jersey law to refer proposition to the states in these circumstances, when she is going to do that?
I thank the Deputy for the question. My understanding is that the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs is dealing with this matter, and it will come to the Assembly shortly.
The first part of the question, Chief Minister, was whether the government was consulted by the United Kingdom before enacting the provision which included the Channel Islands, I suspect.
My understanding is that there is some dialogue with the Home Office, and I'm not aware of a specific approach to myself. However, that is not to say that other ministers have engaged with the relevant departments in the United Kingdom.
A supplemental question, Deputy Welsh. Deputy Hull.
Thank you, sir. In March 2018, the States Assembly agreed in principle that, subject to further research findings, a public service ombudsman should be established to replace the existing complaints board. And I just wondered what progress is being made on this score. Thank you, sir.
I thank the Deputy for the question, and that is in my ministerial plan, as the Deputy outlined, and the work is progressing and should be brought to the Assembly in the near future.
Supplemental question, Deputy Hull.
Just wondered when the near future may be. Thank you, sir.
I think, if I recall, and forgive me for I've had less than 5 hours sleep, towards the end of this year.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. There's been a couple of references in answers to question time to the engagement framework from the Chief Minister. Could the Chief Minister confirm whether there's anything in the engagement framework that extols the virtues of consulting on things that the government intends not to do?
This is quite a long-running issue for the Deputy, and perhaps he enjoys the political repartee, but I think that we have fully discussed this, and I don't really have any more to add on the point.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, sir, I'm trying to get the Chief Minister to find some form of coherent argument that explains why it's a good use of public resources and asking members of the public to dedicate their time and energy to engaging with a process where the conclusion has already been predetermined that the government doesn't want to do what it's consulting on because of its own, perhaps perfectly legitimate political reasons. And if she can somehow find a coherent argument that explains why that's a good use of time and resources, could she perhaps also attempt to find one to explain how that will restore faith in politics when you ask members of the public to take part in a process when you intend to ignore the results of it?
So I believe in open public debate and discourse. We all don't agree all of the time, but it is a very important part of the process to be able to voice one's opinions and to listen to each other. I do believe that that is part of the process.
Deputy Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. What budget was there in existence to support free period products, and how much that budget has been spent so far?
I don't have that exact figure to hand, but I do believe it has been publicised quite widely, and it has been a good exercise, one that we have found and we think that people have embraced, given the take-up of the products on offer. We continue to provide those products in a variety of locations and look to find others.
Perhaps I could simulate the Chief Minister's memory. Was the sum set aside of the order of £400,000, and was some £40,000 only spent on it?
It's an ongoing project, sir, and so we will continue to invest in it and to roll out as it has been explained.
There will be time for perhaps one other very short question. No, in which case the questions for the Chief Minister are now out. I'm sorry, too late. I've closed the questions. Excuse me. I've allowed an urgent oral question from Deputy Feltham to the Minister for Infrastructure. That can now be asked. I would propose to allow precisely the same time allocation for supplemental questions as was allocated to questions with notice in the usual way. Therefore, if you'd like to ask your question, Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister update the Assembly and tell members what areas of the hospital it is known that RAC may be present in, when this information was identified, whether these areas are still being occupied by staff and or accessed by the public, and what is the Minister doing to ensure patient and staff safety?
Minister.
Sir, this issue first came to my attention at the end of last week. I was informed that a detailed review of the existing hospital plans had revealed the possible presence of RAC, particularly in the area referred to as Block F. To be more precise, the plans identified a product suspected to be RAC in the staff laboratory in the pathology department. Whilst less clear, they indicated the possible presence of RAC in two other areas of Block F, including a disused kitchen, which now serves as a storage and plant room. At present, the presence of RAC has yet to be confirmed, and all areas of the hospital continue to be used as they would normally. As might be expected, work has been underway over the past few days to plan various measures that would or will be implemented in the event that RAC is formally identified. I should also mention that formal testing is due to commence this afternoon and will be undertaken by qualified structural engineers. So investigations continue, and there is the possibility that further instances may come to light. With regard to the question about public safety, this is something that most people probably don't know, but the hospital maintenance doesn't sit with infrastructure. It sits directly under HCS. And there's a hospital maintenance team that reports to HCS. So unfortunately, I'm not in a position to comment on what measures will or won't be taken. I've answered the questions as best I can, given that infrastructure does work with that team, but it's not our team's principal responsibility, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Hall.
Yes, sir. Given that the Minister has just stated that it's not his team's principal responsibility, what conversations has he had with the Minister for Health to ensure that this is taken on board as a very urgent matter and something that staff and patients may be very concerned about?
So I'm sure people are very concerned, as indeed was I. I've had no discussions with the Health Minister on the subject because, as I say, it's the responsibility doesn't sit with me.
Deputy Mezek.
Thanks, sir. From his answers that he's given about where responsibility lies for this building, what assurances can he give the Assembly based on conversations he's had with his own officers about whether or not the hospital building is currently safe for the people who are in it? And if he can't give a clear answer on that, will he endeavour to have that conversation as a matter of urgency with those who are responsible for it?
So, whilst it may not fall directly within my remit, you can my phone calls can be checked and my email traffic. I've been in touch with the department every day since Friday on this matter for further particulars. As I say, I've reported that which I can report up to this point in time, and I remain in touch. Myself and my team remains in touch with the hospital maintenance team. So.
I think so. And there was a part of that question asking if, to the best of the Minister's knowledge, based on the extensive discussions he's just outlined he's had in the last few days, whether or not he can confirm if that building is safe for those who are in it.
I think it would be very difficult in my position to offer a full opinion, but I think it's safe to assume that if the people that look after the hospital maintenance consider it to be sufficiently safe to leave open to the public, then my guess there would be that it would be. The material would have to be 30 years old or more, and there hasn't been any movement or any sign of problems. That doesn't provide any guarantee for anybody, but I think one has to be sensible in these instances and ask the question, given that fact, would you want to disrupt the operation of the hospital at this point in time for the matter of 3 or 4 days, particularly as it included a weekend where there isn't a great deal of activity in the hospital, in light of all of the circumstances, and the judgment appears to have been taken that the hospital is to stay open. So.
Have a supplemental, Deputy Mezek. I think that was very well. No, I'm going to press you, Deputy Sutherland.
Surely, if there is a lack of communication or a lack of responsibility, it's not shared in terms of safety of people and staff, then the Minister should have been in touch extensively with the Minister of Health in order to sort things out and make sure that safety was secured.
That was quite an extraordinary statement, a lack of responsibility and a lack of communication. I think the lack of responsibility, perhaps the Deputy would like to point that in the direction of the people that are looking after the job, which, as I say, that doesn't sit with me. Lack of communication, I'm very happy to share with the Deputy after the sitting this afternoon the communications that I've had during the course of the 4 days that this has been revealed.
Supplemental question, Deputy Sutherland.
No, sir, but it just seems to me, and it must seem to others, that what this is denying responsibility and pointing a finger at somebody else.
So I have to say, I'm afraid I consider that comment to be nonsensical. I really don't think it's relevant. So.
Very well. Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Under Jersey's Health and Safety at Work law, It is the duty of every employer to ensure that health, safety and welfare at work of their employees. So while investigations are underway, does the Minister consider it necessary under health and safety regulations to close the possibly dangerous parts of the building, as it may be liable to collapse, as stated in UK regulations, to protect staff?
At the risk of repeating myself for the fourth time, it's not a decision that rests with me, and as such, I'm not able to take that decision. So,
Do you have a supplemental question to that, Deputy Curtis? Final supplementary? No, there's no final supplementary. Yes, final supplementary, Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister, as he said a lot, it's not his responsibility, will he give the Assembly and the general public his assurance that he will work collaboratively with the Health Minister to ensure that she and her team have the necessary resources and expertise from his team to ensure that this matter is sorted out as soon as possible and that health and safety of staff and patients is kept paramount?
there seems to be an insistence, sir, that I do all of this via the Health Minister. I don't see that there's a particular need, given that I'm in constant touch with my own team and that team is in touch with the team that's actually doing the job. We're working collaboratively, and I really don't know what conversation I'd have with the Health Minister in this regard.
Very well. That brings those questions to an end. The next item of business is a statement that is to be made by the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture concerning the Jersey Reds.
Sir, we haven't had a copy of the statement.
I think it's been disseminated electronically. Griffey, is that right? Well, apparently it has been, the send button has been pressed, but the receive screen hasn't happened. And so it may be a question of waiting for a while before it comes through. We give it just a moment or two to see if, is it arriving now?
Sir, may I suggest we revert to analogue and I speak and people listen?
Yes. Well, if it's now come through electronically, I call upon the Minister to make the statement.
Apologies. Sir, thank you for offering the opportunity to make this statement. Sir, there can be no doubt that the Jersey Reds have been a great source of joy and pride for all islanders. In winning the RFU Championship, they achieved a feat that I, and I'm sure all members of this Assembly, could barely have dreamed possible. We are all grateful for this success, but sadly, in my estimation, that success has come at the expense of the long-term sustainability of the professional club. Last week's announcement that the Jersey Reds had ceased trading was a shock for many and distressing for the club's players, staff and supporters. These are the people who have felt the most direct impact, and I, like all members of this Assembly, am thinking of them and sincerely wish that they and the club hadn't found themselves in these circumstances. In making this statement, I want to provide States members with the opportunity to ask questions and to set out clearly why it was the view of the Council of Ministers that government, which had given Jersey Reds financial support over many years, reluctantly could no longer continue to do so. The reality is that the club had not been able to pay its way over the summer, and it was public money that had been keeping the Reds solvent. The funds amounting to £370,000 had been provided to the Reds in the form of 2 grants, authorised by myself as Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, and by the Treasury Minister. These grants were intended to provide the club's directors with the opportunity to find new investment and draw up a sustainable financial plan. Unfortunately, the plan that was offered relied upon speculative monies from the RFU, showed income being gained from assets that are not the Reds, and offered little in the way of cost savings. Even if the RFU's funds were forthcoming, the plan would still have relied upon hundreds of thousands of pounds of government money to keep the Reds afloat. It was my view, and I believe the view of other ministers, that the government had done everything it could to offer the Reds a lifeline, but that given the enormous uncertainties in their plan, to continue providing public money to the Reds
would risk the government becoming committed to funding of an unknown amount over an unknown period of time, and that given the many competing demands on the public purse, to do so would not be a responsible use of taxpayers' money. In colloquial terms, I would liken the Reds' finances to a financial black hole. I came to this conclusion, and I believe it is one shared by ministers, because despite knowing about their financial problems, the Reds had consistently overspent and drawn investors' money at a much faster rate than expected. This inability to stick to a budget meant that neither I nor the Council of Ministers had confidence that the Reds board could move the club onto a sustainable financial footing. The Reds board was quite clearly aware that the likelihood of funding was low, as I emphasised this to the chair and other directors, as well as the sponsors' representatives, in a meeting on the 30th of August. I also repeatedly requested a meeting with the main investor. After the Council of Ministers' decision on 19th of September, I immediately requested officers to arrange a meeting with the main investor, as I wanted to tell him of the decision in person and to have a conversation to explore whether an alternative method of saving the club was available. Officers made this request on 19th of September, the day of the Council of Ministers' decision, and said that it was urgent. Unfortunately, that person declined to meet until the 27th of September. The Reds should be aware that there have been this Assembly should be aware that there have been long-standing financial issues at the Reds dating back to 2016. In 2019, an emergency request was made to government for the sum of £125,000. The request was made in the knowledge that a failure to secure such funding would require Jersey Reds to move away from professional rugby. More recently, the Assistant Minister with responsibility for sport, Deputy Stevenson, met the Reds at their invitation in November 22 to understand the club's long-term ambitions and financial position. Importantly, there was no indication from the club that they were in short-term financial difficulty. At that meeting, Deputy Stevenson made it clear that there was neither budget for further financial support for Jersey Reds, nor did she intend to make it a political priority to secure such funding. Despite having mentioned nothing of financial concerns in November, the Jersey Reds subsequently approached government's then CEO, Suzanne Wiley, in January 2023, with a request for urgent funding of £250,000, with a further £250,000 to follow later in 2023. Deputy Stevenson responded to this request in a letter, circulated alongside the statement, by highlighting the previous government support and making it clear that it was not possible to underwrite further support. Members will note that the Reds were urged to manage their expenditure appropriately and that Deputy Stevenson offered to meet in person, but this offer was not taken up. In June of this year, the professional club again approached government to request urgent funding from the Department for Treasury and Exchequer to prevent an imminent and unstructured collapse. In view of the possible impact on livelihoods, player well-being and the amateur club, ministers approved a grant of £220,000 to meet wage costs and other expenses. In the interest of expediency, this payment was advanced by Santander International, with agreement that it would be reimbursed by government in due course. Santander has now requested this reimbursement, and I will be issuing a letter of instruction to effect this payment later this week. It was also agreed that Santander and government undertake a contemporary review of the club's finances and consideration of its viability in the medium to long term. It allowed time for the directors of Jersey Reds to assess their options, raise new investors, and present a valid case for support to government. In August, with continuing financial difficulties, Jersey Reds again approached government to request a second urgent payment to meet their imminent wage costs. Ministers approved a grant of £150,000 to allow for the work assessing the club's long-term viability to be completed, and for the Council of Ministers to be able to assess the case, meet and make a final decision. This brought total government grants to £370,000 in 3 months, simply to meet wages and other essential costs. It is fair to say that the club was entirely unable to meet its wage obligations at this time, and had government support not been provided, the club would have ceased trading immediately. Despite not being able to pay wages, the club announced in the media that it had hired a new member of the coaching staff at the beginning of September. I have to question such decision-making by the club, when I believe it knew at the point of hiring that it did not have the funds to pay salaries. Following a third request for funding in as many months, the Council of Ministers met on 19th of September. They considered the significant funding shortfall facing the club and the continuing uncertainty over the future of funding from the RFU, the ability of the Reds to attract new private sponsorship, and whether identified savings targets could be met. Ministers decided that it was not appropriate to provide further public funding because there was no evidence that the Reds would become financially sustainable in the future. And given these circumstances, that it was not justifiable to underwrite the operations of the professional club on an ongoing, indefinite basis. Sir, the grants this summer were just the most recent forms of financial support given by government. Since the establishment of Jersey Reds, successive governments have provided significant financial support. I've set out those sums in an appendix to this statement so that members can understand them in detail. Over the past 2 years, the Reds have been advised by ministers and officers that they cannot rely on government funding, that they have to live within their means. Sadly, this was not advice that the Reds board has heeded. Financial information compiled by Santander International shows financial losses in every financial year, from the year ending June 2017 through to the year ending June 2023. This translates to a cumulative loss of £2.6 million, even after receiving government and COVID support over that period. In addition, since early 2023, Jersey Reds have been given extra time to pay outstanding Social Security, ITIS, GST and licence amounts. That debt is approximately £457,000. It is deeply regrettable that despite this significant financial support, Jersey Reds have not been able to reach a stable financial footing. Sir, I also want to reference the economic impact of the Jersey Reds, which was independently assessed in 2016 by Via Analytics. This independent assessment determined that Jersey Reds made a contribution of £1.4 to £2.1 million annually to Jersey's economy, a substantially different valuation to the £5 million figure which the Reds have claimed. This economic value is largely derived from tax on payroll and fans from visiting clubs travelling to watch their team play in Jersey. It should be noted, however, that matchday spectator numbers have steadily fallen since 2016, when the valuation was undertaken, and that the professional club has been unable to meet its ITIS payments, as I mentioned previously. And so it could be argued that the current economic value of Jersey Reds is less than the 2.1 million it was valued at in 2016. The level of economic return does not justify a level of financial support anywhere close to the levels sought now or in the future. Sir, the sad demise of the Reds does not mean that this government doesn't support rugby. I'm pleased to have in Deputy Stevenson an Assistant Minister who is passionate about delivering sport for Islanders. She clearly recognises the positive social and community benefits sporting activity brings, and I know that she will work to provide support to the amateur club so that grassroots rugby can flourish in the island. Deputy Stevenson has already reached out to the JRFC to offer our support as we work to try to mitigate the potential impact on them, so our commitment to support and to amateur rugby remains strong. Sir, Deputy Stevenson, other ministers and I have acted to give the Jersey Reds the best chance of survival. But ultimately, the continuing inability of the club to operate within its means and its failure to offer a convincing case for the responsible continued provision of public funds means that we couldn't continue to support further funding. Some states members have a different view, and so I welcome the debate to come. But it remains the case that we are unable to be sure how much funding will be required and for how long, and to commit further funds to the Reds would mean funds not going elsewhere to deliver services that all Islanders need. Sir, thank you for the opportunity to make this statement. I'll be pleased to take any questions that members have.
There's now a period of 15 minutes of questions. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. There's a statement, a paragraph, which says, in August, with continuing financial difficulties, Jersey Reds again approached government to meet wage costs, and then ministers approved a grant of £150,000 to allow for work assessing the club's long-term viability to be completed. Will the minister clarify whether that £150,000 was to allow time for the work to be taken to clarify the long-term viability, or whether the £150,000 was, as the sentence says, to actually allow the work to be carried out?
Sir, ultimately the £150,000 was to enable wages to be paid. This in itself gave time for that piece of work to be completed.
Okay, I thank the Minister for the clarity, because I think that's not what it says, but I think that's the logical way to conclude that. Can I ask why the government, and I respect the government's position, even if I don't necessarily agree with it, that they won't give states money to a private company, but if they didn't have any assurance of the long-term viability of the club in August, why on earth would they give £150,000 to pay a wage bill for a club that they weren't certain was viable in the long term, when they may not do that for any other business in the island which might also be facing similar problems?
So it's a very good question, and one that in the moment is exactly what's going through the mind of a minister, I can tell you firsthand. At that stage, in August, the work was still being undertaken on creating effectively a business plan for the future, which is one that Deputy Farnham has presented with his proposition. That work hadn't been completed, so at that stage we were unable to see whether there was a route to financial sustainability. Equally, at that time, the council ministers would need to be able to see that piece of work before they could make a decision as well, because also at that time I felt that this, the decision to not provide funding, if that was the decision that was to go ahead, for the one minister to do that, I felt it should be escalated to the council ministers, and quite understandably now it's being escalated to the States Assembly, which I think is a perfectly valid way forward, because at the end of the day, what is the difference between this business and, let's say, some of the construction firms that failed within the last 12 months? It is ultimately, it is that community element, the community spirit element, the joy that it brings to islanders that is different to perhaps a construction firm, which perhaps is likely to have much, much greater economic value to the island than the Jersey Reds does. I would hazard, I haven't looked into it, but I would hazard a guess that those construction firms provided much greater economic impact. But because they don't provide joy in quite the same way as a rugby team does, or bring a community together in quite the same way as a rugby team does, I think that is one of the clear differences. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Scott.
Sir, I would like to ask the Minister quite his position regarding scrutiny in this matter, because on the basis that we had no knowledge, not despite having had quarterly hearings with the Assistant Minister, we had no knowledge that the financial viability of the Jersey Reds was being looked at into the government, notwithstanding, and that grants were being given. But I also asked the Minister in terms of the considering of apple and pears. I mean, he's mentioned construction firms, but one thing which scrutiny has struggled with, and this is a question, is whether there has been any real analysis in terms of grants that are given to bodies such as Visit Jersey, Jersey National Park, in terms of the economic benefit for the tourist industry in the shoulder months, bearing in mind that Visit Jersey has actually said that given the huge reduction of...
Deputy, the question, I mean, I'm sure a question is coming, but the question has to be succinct in accordance with standing orders, and I think we're stretching the definition.
Reduction of hotel beds, value for money in terms of grants with to bodies like Visit Jersey in the shoulder months, an economic analysis that's dated 2016. To what extent has work been done in terms of updating this, in terms of the value to the economy, and where on earth was scrutiny in all this?
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'd address the scrutiny element first. I think there is absolutely no intention to cause any unhappiness in scrutiny by not notifying scrutiny of this. I don't believe it's the case that government has to notify scrutiny of every action or thought process that it goes through. But in this case, the difficulty with opening up to a wider audience is quite simply the commercial confidentiality and the impact that any leakage of this information would have on things like lenders, the staff, etc., and the players at the club. So it is a very difficult place for any minister to be in when faced with something which has such personal ramifications. And so there was no intention, there was absolutely to my knowledge, there was no conscious decision not to involve scrutiny. I just think that it's very difficult to involve scrutiny in matters that are so confidential. With regards to economic impact assessment, we undertake economic impact assessments in different areas. Government has resources that restrict the amount of work that we can do, and it just seems that in this area, the visitor economy side hadn't been done more recently. I point back to the fact that it's not the economic value to the island that myself or other ministers were concerned about in this case. It was actually the unsustainability of the Jersey Reds finances and the lack of confidence that we had in the Jersey Reds board to actually get a grip on their spending. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Scott?
Yes, coming back to, please, coming back to the lack of confidence in terms of the management and the unsustainability of the finances, I come back to this specific question. At any time, as the government, as the ministers became more aware of the state of the finances, was consideration given to the possibility of involving a representative for Treasury on the board or somebody out from the community to have a turnaround to replace the people responsible for managing the finances in order to achieve more in the way of sustainability of funding?
Sir, I believe that it was mentioned as a proposal at some stage during the summer, and I can't remember which particular meeting, that that was a viable option, that government could have representatives on the board, etc. It was my view, and I believe it was the view of Deputy Stevenson and other ministers, that the last thing government would want would be to be invested into the Reds, to be effectively on the hook for an unidentified sum of money on an ongoing basis, and being closer to the management of the Reds without any assurances that if a Treasury member was on the board, that any assurances that other board members would in any way listen to that Treasury member, it wasn't a viable option from our perspective. Our perspective, sir, and this is also to correct some of the misinformation that was put out over the weekend. From our side, as a minister, council ministers, we only ever considered grant giving because we did not want the government to be in a position where it had to say yes every time the Reds came looking for more money, and we had every indication that the Reds would continue to ask for urgent government funding long into the future, sir.
Conrad Simplard.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister indicate to members with the previous grants that were given out whether any conditions were attached to those grants which indicated that there would be no further funding after that grant was paid? Thank you, sir.
Sir, yes, thank you, sir. In 2020, before I was Minister, indeed when Deputy Farnham was Minister, a Governor Jersey grant of £250,000 was given, the first instalment of multi-year support that totalled £450,000. The reason for that grant was to secure professional rugby in Jersey, and the purpose was to enable Jersey Reds to become financially sustainable over an extended 3-year period, after which no further government support would be required. As those instalments were provided, I myself remember saying, as an assistant minister, to the chair of the Jersey Reds at the end of the meeting, or in fact during the meeting, that there was no further government support. This was back in 2020 or 2021, depending which of the meetings that occurred in. So I know that I have said myself years ago to the Reds that there would be no further financial support from government, that they needed to get themselves on a sustainable footing. That was the intention, I believe, of the Minister at the time, Deputy Farnham, but unfortunately that wasn't something that they were able to hold to.
Supplemental question, Conrad.
Thank you, sir. And would the Minister agree that we have a series of what would I might describe as well-respected philanthropic directors and yet an operational side which doesn't, with which there doesn't seem to be a connection? Would the Minister agree that the government, or past governments even, could have done more with regard to due diligence on the Jersey Red Company per se before giving grants? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. In essence, and this refers back to Deputy Tudier's question to some extent, in essence, part of the reason for paying £370,000 over the summer was to do that due diligence, to really understand the Reds' finances. Unfortunately, what came back to us was not a plan that government felt it was able to support. And with regard to private investors, it must not be forgotten that private investors have provided loans and investment monies to the Reds, which have all been spent. And I believe, it is my understanding, that all of that has been spent well in advance of when those investors expected it to be spent, which again gave us, as a council of ministers, very clear cause for concern as to the viability of any grant funding going forward. How would we stop that acceleration of spending? How would we maintain control of expenditure from the Jersey Reds if we were to continue funding it into the future?
Connetable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. If it is the case that Jersey Reds is now to fold, it would have been for the benefit of all concerned, and particularly the players, if that had happened in the close season, so they could actually have obtained other employment. Which leads me on to the question, sir, as to what did give the council ministers hope that some form of improvement might take place during the intervening months, and in particular, was some suggestion made by the board that there were plans in the offing, maybe with the RFU itself, and were any inquiries made of the RFU as to what any form, as to whether any form of restructure was likely? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It has struck me over the last few weeks that it is the case that you can't do right for doing wrong, in the sense that had, back in June or July, had I or Deputy Stevenson's been absolutely 100% firm, there is no more money, have the Treasury Minister's agreement that there's no more, and just firmly said no at that point, whilst that may have given the off-season, as the Constable suggests, is a better time for players to seek other employment. The difficulty with that decision then is we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do the due diligence that the Constable St Bernard was just talking about. And so it is one of those questions, you're in the moment and you're sat there, do we just say no now and wipe the slate clean now, but then I would absolutely be accused of not giving the Reds a chance? Or do we give the Reds a chance, but the downside to that is players and staff are then trying to find work in the season rather than the off-season. So it's a very, very difficult position and predicament to be placed in, sir.
Supplemental question? In fact, that brings the first period of 15 minutes to an end. I have Deputy Felton, Farnham, the Connetable St Lawrence to ask again, and Deputy Howell wishes to ask, I think, as does Deputy Tadier, a follow-up question. It is open to members to extend by an additional 15 minutes only. So the first question is, do members wish to continue? Those in favour, kindly show. Those against? Very well. Well, I will take that as we'll continue by 15 minutes. The second thing is, do we continue now to conclude this particular matter, or do we adjourn until adjourn for luncheon in the normal way?
Propose the adjournment, please.
The adjournment seconded? Very well. The Assembly will stand adjourned then until 2:15.